Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the most dreaded occupations in medieval Europe, the executioner. And that truly puts things into perspective, especially in an era when being a rat catcher or a full-time plague survivor counted as legitimate professions. From delivering justice with a blade to enduring curses, fear, and social isolation, the executioner's existence was a bizarre and harsh contradiction. He was essential, yet never embraced. So, before you settle in, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe, only if you genuinely appreciate the content I create here, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always intriguing to see who's tuning in from across the global.
Tonight, we delve into one of the most unenviable occupations of the medieval era, the executioner. This was a truly grim calling, especially when considering that professions like rat catcher or full-time plague survivor were considered legitimate career paths. From wielding the sword of justice to enduring curses, widespread fear, and social ostracism, the life of a medieval executioner was a peculiar and brutal contradiction. He was undeniably essential, yet never genuinely welcomed. So, before you settle in, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing, but only if you genuinely appreciate the content I provide. Also, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our global audience. Now, dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan for some gentle background noise, and let's embark on tonight's historical exploration together. Congratulations, you've just been born. You're the newest addition to a venerable medieval family of executioners. That's right. While other infants are swaddled in fine linen, destined for lives as bakers, butchers, or even, if fortune smiles upon them, monks, you are gently placed in a cradle beside a whetstone and an axe. It's not a mere rattle you're shaking, it's your future. In the Middle Ages, becoming an executioner wasn't a role you applied for. There was no municipal office for submitting your credentials. This was a position inherited, much like a deeply cursed family heirloom. If your father served as the executioner, you were the next in line. It was as straightforward as that. There was no room for a change in profession. No aspirations of becoming a wandering minstrel or a somewhat melancholic shoemaker. Your destiny was predetermined, leading directly to the chopping block. From the moment you're old enough to toddle, villagers cast sidelong glances your way. Other children flee from you at the village well. Adults lower their voices as you pass, as if you're tiny. Nascent hands are already symbolically stained with blood, and, spoiler alert, they are, symbolically, for now. You are raised in a household where dinner table conversations revolve less around, "How was your day?" and more around, "How many strikes will it take to ensure a clean severing?" There's no escaping it. Your playthings might include miniature gallows, and your bedtime stories feature unsettling phrases like, "drawing and quartering," instead of, "happily ever after." It's not merely the gruesome work itself, it's the indelible reputation that clings to you. You could be the most benevolent, erudite, and soft-spoken child in the entire kingdom. Yet people would still treat you as though you secretly crept into homes at night, whispering ominous threats to their livestock. Your very surname might brand you. In certain towns, entire lineages of executioners were labeled, meticulously tracked, and occasionally barred from entering churches, bakeries, or even public bathhouses. Hygiene and salvation? Not for you. But there are certain advantages. You'll likely never suffer from severe bullying. No one wishes to provoke the executioner's child, the fear is palpable. You might not be liked, but you will undoubtedly be respected, much in the same way people respect a violent thunderstorm or exceptionally sharp blades. So, welcome to your life. You didn't request this existence, but it is now irrevocably yours. So, you've just entered the world. Hurrah! A delightful, bouncing bundle of joy, wrapped in wool, purified by holy water. and instantly burdened with generational trauma. You are the newest scion of an executioner family, medieval society's most indispensable yet least desired profession. While other youngsters are destined to churn butter or someday inherit a sheep farm, you have been born into the one occupation that guarantees everyone will shun you as if you were a coughing stranger during a plague epidemic. Your fate is sealed: sharp metal, public spectacles, and a lifetime of being the individual no one dares to make eye contact with, even when you're just 6 years old. And no, you don't get to choose your path. Being an executioner isn't a role you can apply for. There's no medieval job fair featuring a booth that advertises, "Love justice, despise popularity? Inquire within." If your father wielded the axe, guess what you'll be swinging after puberty? Even as a toddler, villagers whisper when you pass by. You haven't even performed your first decapitation. Yet you're already treated as if you viciously bite farm animals. The blacksmith's child receives treats, you receive suspicious gazes and a wider berth in the church pews, that is, if you're even permitted inside the church. Family dinners are less about, "How was your day?" and more about, "Did you remember to oil the gallows chain?" Your bedtime stories omit dragons unless those dragons are being executed for heresy. Your toys consist of miniature scaffolds. Your version of hide-and-seek typically concludes with people hiding and never returning. You can't even escape your destiny through marriage. Most respectable families wouldn't allow their daughters within 5 feet of you, let alone near the altar, which is probably for the best, given that your family name has been uttered like a curse word for the past 3 generations. That's Carl's boy, you know, the one who executed too deeply last winter. And yes, there are certain advantages. No one dares to bully the executioner's child. Even the local ruffian doesn't want to end up as your practice subject. You develop a robust physique, a steady hand, and an unervingly impassive stare that effectively excuses you from most social gatherings, which is convenient, as you're never invited anyway. So, there it is. You are not merely born. You are branded. You did not select the life of the axe selected you, and it will not release its grip. By the time you're old enough to cultivate a beard or practice with a training axe, you've already internalized one fundamental truth: the town relies on you. But they would prefer you remain out of sight, ideally behind a curtain, a distant hill, or a moral veil of plausible deniability. As a medieval executioner, you embody society's walking paradox. You undertake the work no one else dares to perform, and for this, you are rewarded with silence, suspicion, and the occasional terrified blessing from a distance of 10 feet. People address you as if you were a haunted well, useful in a crisis, yet profoundly unsettling at all other times. Need someone publicly disemboweled? The town summons you. Need someone invited to their daughter's wedding feast? Not a chance. You are the ultimate solution to every problem the sheriff wishes to keep off his conscience. And yet, once the deed is done and the head tumbles into the straw, everyone suddenly remembers they have urgent business elsewhere, typically anywhere that isn't in your immediate vicinity. In official court documents, you are referred to as the blade of justice. In tavern whispers, you are that creepy individual who probably converses with skulls. You could rescue a child from drowning, and someone would still murmur, "Yes, but how many people has he cleaved in half?" To them, you represent both punishment and paranoia. A stark reminder that the law possesses teeth, large, sharp, and publicly displayed ones. And let's not pretend this sentiment is limited to the peasantry. Even nobles recoil. They will compensate you with silver and commend themselves for upholding justice, but you will never be invited to dine in their grand halls. Unless it is to demonstrate proper axe technique between courses. Furthermore, if anything goes awry, say you mishandle an execution or someone becomes squeamish during torture, it is your head on the proverbial, and possibly literal, chopping block. The same crowd that applauded your last performance will turn on you more rapidly than a frightened chicken. You are not a man, you are a tool. And everyone pretends you don't exist unless they require something violently removed. So, yes, the town requires your services, but they would much prefer you enter through the back door. Wear a hood, and depart before sunrise. A gruesome education. While other boys are learning to plow fields, shoe horses, or, if they are particularly fortunate, read. Your education is considerably more specialized. You are not studying scripture or sewing techniques, you are learning how to sever spines in a single, clean stroke. Welcome to your childhood apprenticeship, where precision is not optional, and failure doesn't merely cost lives, it destroys your reputation before you even establish one. Your father, or some grizzled older executioner with arms like tree trunks, imparts to you the sacred art of not botching the job in front of a crowd. Because while everyone might feign disdain for your profession, they will absolutely scrutinize your form, footwork, and follow-through as if it were the medieval Olympics. Your curriculum encompasses chopping techniques, because missing the neck by even an inch transforms justice into a grotesque comedy show. Anatomy is crucial, as you must discern which bones are easiest to fracture and which will cause your axe to rebound in public humiliation. And stage presence is paramount, because every execution is, undeniably, a public spectacle. You are the final act, the main event, the very reason people abandon their farms and bring their children to the town square. Consider it dinner theater, but instead of dessert, there's dismemberment. There is no practice dummy, unless you count the occasional pig carcass or an exceptionally unlucky rebel. Most of what you learn is on the job. And let's be honest. Everyone remembers your first attempt, especially if it doesn't go smoothly. Especially if you freeze or tremble, or, heaven forbid, require more than one swing. Nothing will haunt you more than a partially decapitated criminal and an impatient crowd. You are trained to be calm, efficient, and unshakable, but no one teaches you how to cope. There is no medieval human resources department, no stress leave, no self-care scroll on how to not dwell on severed heads. You simply sharpen your blade, suppress your guilt, and prepare for the next performance. The social pariah. And what do you receive in return for your exquisitely honed, lethal expertise? Not admiration, not gratitude, merely silence. Perhaps a few extra coins and the lingering scent of death clinging to your clothes and soul. You are not just trained to kill, you are trained to quietly bear the immense weight of it. Picture this. It's a sun-drenched morning. The market square buzzes with activity. Bakers are hawking bread that smells vaguely edible. Blacksmiths are confidently hammering away. And the butcher is enthusiastically brandishing a cleaver. Everyone is shouting prices, gossiping, living their small, medieval lives. Then you appear. The crowd parts as if you are carrying the plague in one hand and a severed head in the other. And to be fair, sometimes you are. But even when you're simply there to purchase turnips, people scatter like rats fleeing a torch. You see, executioners were often prohibited or strongly discouraged from even entering public markets. In some towns, you had to wait until after hours to buy food. In others, you had your own designated corner of shame where vendors would leave your goods for you to collect. Like a cursed medieval delivery service. Why? Because, apparently, the man who carries out legal killings is somehow too unclean to touch a radish. If you dared to mingle with the common folk, things quickly became awkward. Merchants would handle your coins with tongs, or worse, outright refuse them. You could be holding pristine silver, and they would react as if you had handed them a live scorpion dipped in guilt. Oh no, not from you, good sir. We're, out of cabbage today. Children are snatched away. Protective crosses are made. One particularly dramatic fishwife spits every time you walk by, not directly at you, but close enough to convey her feelings with perfect clarity. Touching goods was a precarious undertaking. If you so much as handled a loaf of bread, no one else would desire it. If your fingers merely brushed against a pile of apples, that entire crate might be unceremoniously discarded into a ditch, purely out of spiritual apprehension. A single contact from your purportedly cursed executioner fingers, and an item transitioned from marketable to forbidden. Consequently, most executioners eventually learn to dispatch someone else to handle their shopping, if they had the means. A relative, a bribed servant, anyone possessing a less unsettling aura, someone whose hands didn't faintly reek of burning justice. And so, you would once again retreat to your solitary dwelling, your private food stores, and your increasingly antisocial way of life. Because even when your working hours concluded, the townspeople still remembered precisely who you were. And they would genuinely prefer it if you refrained from touching the cheese. The isolated abode. Congratulations, you've secured your own living space. Regrettably, it's not situated within the town itself, not even in its vicinity. Your new address lies beyond the northern gate, past the gallows, in close proximity to the wild boars. As a medieval executioner, you don't merely receive a cold shoulder, you face outright banishment by civic ordinance. You are expressly forbidden from residing within the city walls alongside ordinary citizens. Instead, your dwelling occupies a space somewhere between a hermit's humble hut and a haunted outpost. You are less a member of the village community and more an undesirable forest non-player character. There's a clear rationale behind this, of course, a confluence of superstition, religious conviction, and good old-fashioned hypocrisy. The very individuals who employ you to wield an axe at 10:00 a.m. are unwilling to risk your allegedly cursed energy permeating their neighborhood by 6 p.m. Your home is typically located near the execution grounds, purely for convenience. Convenient for whom, precisely, remains ambiguous, certainly not for you. You live literally in the shadow of your grim work, with the gallows creaking in the wind and crows observing you as if you were their next meal. Occasionally, corpses still hang within view of your breakfast table. Bon appetit. The dwelling itself is technically yours, a gift from the city, which in medieval terms translates to, "We dumped some lumber in a field and wished you good fortune." Drafty, damp, and wonderfully isolated, your abode might be the sole residence in Christendom adorned with a doormat that reads, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here, not for visitors, but for your own self-esteem." No neighbors, no leisurely strolls, no visiting merchants or passing monks. Just you, your implements, and the occasional raccoon with no concept of personal boundaries. You might discern the faint chime of church bells in the distance, but you will never hear the cheerful clamor of the marketplace. You are sufficiently close to serve the town, yet perpetually far enough to never truly belong to it. And when storms rage, who hurries to check on your well-being? No one. The town forgets your existence until the next criminal necessitates a definitive solution. Thus, you reside outside the walls, a man set apart. Visible only when your presence is absolutely required, like thunder, ominous, functional, and best appreciated from a distance. A desolate family life. So, you are an executioner. You live outside the walls. Your handshake is regarded as a biohazard, and your trips for groceries demand diplomatic finesse. But surely, you can find solace in family, right? Right. Well, here's the reality: medieval executioners did have families, but they faced significant hurdles in establishing them. Once your profession became known, your romantic prospects plummeted faster than a heretic through a trapdoor. No one desired to marry the man whose job description included the phrase, "clean up arterial spray." Respectable families would bolt their doors when you walked past. Fathers would pull their daughters closer. Even the town drunk, who once proposed to a goat, would look at you and remark, "A bit much, don't you think?" Consequently, your dating pool was extraordinarily shallow. Often, the only individuals willing to marry executioners were other societal outcasts, grave diggers, knacker men, lepers, or, if you were exceptionally fortunate, widows whose standards had suffered severe structural damage. Romantic, candlelit dinners? Try hushed conversations in dark alleyways so no one would witness her speaking with you. And if you did manage to marry and procreate, your children inherited your profession like a curse woven into their very being. Sons were trained from an early age to wield steel with surgical precision. Daughters, well, they simply carried the name, which was usually sufficient to ensure their social ostracization by the age of 6. It's not so much a family unit as it is a legally mandated support staff. Your family cannot attend festivals, cannot stroll through town together, cannot pretend to be normal for even a single Sunday. If they do venture to church, they occupy the rearmost pews. Or they don't go at all. Because even salvation has its boundaries, and over time, that unrelenting isolation takes a profound toll. You love your children, undoubtedly. But you also bequeath them a future that reeks of blood and loneliness. The family tree doesn't flourish, it merely repeats the same job, the same shame. The same invisible barrier separating you from the rest of humanity. There are no proud family portraits, no distinguished crests, just a long line of individuals who wore hoods. Not to conceal their identities, but because the world never wished to see them in the first place. The Church's condemnation. So, you've diligently performed your duties, literally, all week. You've severed heads, disemboweled a heretic or two, and perhaps even cleansed your blade with holy water out of sheer anxiety. Surely, it's time to confess your transgressions, right? Light a candle. Offer a prayer. Begin anew. Well, not quite. In the eyes of the medieval church, you occupy a paradoxical position somewhere between necessary evil and a walking contradiction. Yes. You enforce divine justice. Yes, you serve the state and uphold law and order. But also, and this is crucial, you kill people for a living, which is, inconveniently, a sin. And so, despite performing God's grim work, you are hardly welcome in His house. Many executioners were outright denied confession. Some priests would refuse to listen. Others insisted you undergo ritual purification before stepping inside the church, a challenging demand, as no amount of soap can cleanse a reputation. And don't even contemplate receiving Holy Communion. That was reserved for pure souls, yours bears a more permanent stain. It's a cruel irony, you kill with state approval, yet spiritually. You are treated like a man who strangles kittens for amusement. Even lepers, who at least had a medical excuse, were often afforded more compassion. Weddings? Not in the church. Christenings? Perhaps, if the priest is having a particularly magnanimous day and half the town isn't glaring at him. Funerals? Don't count on it. Some executioners weren't even interred in consecrated ground. They received the ditch outside the cemetery walls, prime real estate for exiles, suicides, and those who neglected to tithe. So, where does that leave you spiritually? In a profoundly uncomfortable void. You spend your life immersed in death, yet you possess no pathway to forgiveness. You cannot unburden yourself. You cannot seek solace from a friar or light a votive candle for your transgressions. Instead, you carry them silently, heavily. Sometimes you drink. Sometimes you scream into the wilderness. Sometimes you simply sharpen your blade once more. Even when you believe you are acting righteously, when the law is unambiguous, the trial equitable. You still return home uncertain whether you are damned by humanity, by God, or by both. Because even in a world where everyone sins, you are the one who made a profession out of it. The performer's pressure. There is nothing quite like the immense pressure of conducting executions in front of a clamoring throng. It's part justice, part solemn ritual, part public spectacle. And you are the star performer. Forget about nerves. Disregard inclement weather. The crowd doesn't care if your wrist aches, if your stomach is empty, or if the axe is slightly dull from last week's double hanging. They came to witness a show. And you? You are holding both the spotlight and the blade. The objective is straightforward. One clean swing. A swift, clean decapitation is the benchmark of excellence. Anything less, and the murmurs commence. Miss by an inch? The crowd gasps. Require a second swing? They groan. A third? Now they're booing. Some are laughing. One child has just begun to cry. Someone hurls an onion. And let's be frank, you feel it too, the shame, the failure, the victim still twitching on the block. The blood spurting incorrectly, your boots sticky with regret. You were not trained for this aspect, the psychological shrapnel that results from transforming someone's final moments into a civic embarrassment. Sometimes the axe catches on bone. Sometimes the condemned person lurches at the last instant. Sometimes your hand simply slips. And in those moments, your entire reputation, and quite possibly your livelihood, hangs precariously in the balance. Because here's the truth, no one cares how arduous the task is, they merely demand that it appears effortless. Executioners are expected to be clinical, devoid of emotion, and precise. If you falter, you risk appearing weak. And in a world obsessed with strength, weakness is contagious. And the rumors propagate rapidly. He required 2 swings. His hand was trembling. The poor wretch suffered. You become a cautionary tale, whispered in breadlines, don't end up like that unfortunate soul. Or worse. Like the man who couldn't even finish the job. So you return home, scour your blade, and relive every error, every gasp, every groan. You replay it until your mind is too exhausted to continue its torment. And even then, it lingers. Because in your world, the axe doesn't just fall on the condemned. It perpetually hovers over you as well, every time you ascend that platform. The unseen labors and ill-gotten gains. So, you've performed the deed. The crowd has gasped, stared, and dispersed. The condemned is headless. Justice has been served, and the village square has returned to selling cabbage. Time to pack up and head home, right? Not even close. Being an executioner wasn't solely about swinging an axe. That was the dramatic segment, the conspicuous moment. The remainder was far messier, considerably quieter, and grotesquely unappreciated. Because someone has to deal with the body. And, surprise, it's you. You might be instructed to cremate the body, inter it in unconsecrated ground. Or stuff it into a shallow grave beneath the gallows, the medieval equivalent of a garbage chute. No funeral, no ceremony, just the faint hope that the local dogs don't exhume it. And you receive no gloves, no soap, no respite. You are, effectively, the sanitation department of death, the ultimate cleanser of sin, the silent custodian of justice, and no one offers thanks. In fact, the very people who cheered the execution now avoid you even more diligently, because you reek of ash and entrails. There are also the ancillary duties. Torture? That's on you. Branding criminals? You again. Setting up public shaming devices? You're the man with the hammer and nails. Sometimes, they'll even have you flog someone while simultaneously reading scripture aloud. Multitasking your way through a moral collapse. Oh, and if a noble demands absolute discretion. Guess who's cleaning up the noble's mess with 0 witnesses and a very real understanding that if anyone talks, they're next. Executioner by title, yes, but by function. You are medieval society's all-purpose horror technician. When the crowds dissipate, the priests fall silent, and the court scribes retreat to their parchment, you remain behind. You complete the work no one else can stomach. For all the fear, revulsion, and existential dread that envelop your role, being an executioner does come with one undeniable advantage: you get paid. In fact, you are often compensated more generously than your average peasant, sometimes significantly more. Executions, torture sessions, dismemberment duties, they all come with a substantial purse of silver. Add in bribes for extra discretion or for dispatching the condemned swiftly, and you might even find yourself with the kind of money that elicits envy from bakers. But here's the catch: the burden of wealth. You can't spend your earnings like an ordinary person. You stride into a tavern with a pouch full of jingling coins, and suddenly the entire room falls silent. The barkeep pours your ale, then meticulously wipes the counter, as if your very presence leaves an indelible stain. You tip him handsomely, doubling the usual amount, yet he still won't meet your gaze. You go to acquire a new tunic, and the tailor hands you the finished garment using tongs. The coins you offer are genuine currency, but to him, they are cursed blood money, he mutters under his breath, as if the silver might inflict a bite. And heaven forbid you attempt to engage in charity. On one occasion, you tried to donate to the church. They accepted the contribution, then promptly used it to compensate someone else for cleaning the holy relics, just in case. Indeed, you can amass considerable wealth. You might even construct a modest dwelling furnished with actual furniture, a rarity for someone of your social standing. But the irony is profound: the more you acquire, the more isolated you become. You are affluent, certainly, but your richness is akin to that of a dragon hoarding gold in a secluded cave, alone and universally feared. People mistakenly assume that financial prosperity compensates for social stigma, that a heavy purse can somehow counterbalance a heavy conscience. However, gold does not silence the spectral visitations of nightmares. It doesn't erase the indelible marks of blood from your memory, nor does it restore your lost humanity. It merely lies there, cold, glittering, and utterly useless for the things that genuinely matter. You don't purchase peace with money in the Middle Ages, you purchase silence. You purchase space. You purchase the dubious privilege of drinking alone at a secluded table without being instructed to leave. And deep down, you grasp the grim truth: every coin you possess was procured with someone else's final breath. This is the true currency of your existence, and no quantity of it will ever procure forgiveness. The unseen man. In a town perhaps only a few hundred strong, everyone knows precisely who you are. They are intimately familiar with your name, your residence, the sound of your footsteps, your profession, and most crucially, your shadow. They whisper about it: "That's him." They murmur as you pass: "Executioner." They instinctively pull their children closer, as if you might inadvertently decapitate someone mid-stride. And yet, despite this ubiquitous recognition, no one truly knows you. You might possess a favorite melody, a cherished childhood memory, or a surprisingly adept hand at wood carving, but none of that matters. Your entire identity is ruthlessly reduced to a single function: the blade. People don't perceive you. They perceive what you do. You are a living job description. Even when you are off duty, simply walking to purchase onions, people cross the street as if you carry a virulent contagion. No one inquires about your well-being. No one asks if the demands of your profession weigh heavily on your soul, because they have already concluded that you are utterly devoid of emotion. To them, you are not a man burdened by doubts or regrets, you are an axe with legs. It's a peculiar dichotomy. You are known by everyone, yet fully comprehended by no one. You are present in every courtroom verdict, every hushed bedtime story, every moral lesson whispered to misbehaving children, but never truly invited into the world you serve. When you enter the tavern, voices subside. When you depart, they surge once more. You hear laughter, but never shared with you, always after your departure. There is no "How was your day?" No "Are you holding up all right?" No, do you ever wish things were different? If you speak too much, you are considered unsettling. If you remain silent, you are deemed cold. If you dare to smile, that is the most egregious offense, it's macabre. The man who wields the sword should never, under any circumstance, smile. And so, over time, you embody the role. You become the figure they already believe you to be, grim, taciturn, and seemingly carved from stone. You learn to stand motionless, to nod, to recede. Because while everyone in town knows your name, not a single one of them truly knows you. You are a myth with a pulse, a necessary phantom, familiar in function, alien in every other regard. The nightmares of the block. After a protracted day of dismemberment, with blood-stained boots and the polite trauma of public duty, you finally return to your quaint little cottage outside the walls, enveloped by silence and a faint metallic odor. You shed your cloak, lay down your axe, and settle onto the edge of your straw mattress, striving to reclaim your humanity. But the nightmares are already lying in wait. You lie down and close your eyes, and there they are, the faces. Not heroic, not villainous, simply people. Some screamed, some wept, some mumbled fervent prayers with trembling lips. Some stared directly into your eyes, as if to articulate, "You know this is wrong." And the most haunting of all, the ones who uttered nothing, the calm ones, the resigned ones, those who embraced their fate more swiftly than you ever could. You relive every swing. You feel every bone crunch. You hear the gasps of the crowd, their disgust, their perverse delight. You visualize the bodies plummeting in slow motion, like tragic marionettes with their strings severed. There is no escape, not in slumber, not in silence, not in drink. Believe me, you have tried. You begin to flinch at quotidian sounds. The clatter of firewood, the taut snap of rope, the creak of wooden stairs. All are relentless reminders, haunting echoes. And you can never erase the memories of the executions you botched. The blade that faltered, the cut that went awry, the agonizing moan of someone who was meant to die more swiftly. You bear that burden. No one checks on your well-being. There is no medieval counselor for post-traumatic decapitation disorder. You don't compose letters detailing your anguish. You don't weep in public. You simply stare into the flickering fire and pray that your soul doesn't succumb to complete numbness before your hands do. Sometimes, late at night, you question yourself. What if they were innocent? What if justice erred? What if I erred? But you already understand that the answer is irrelevant, because the sentence was pronounced. The crowd gathered. The axe descended, and the nightmares persisted. You were trained to kill, not to grieve. But your dreams apparently missed that memo. So you awaken with clenched fists, throbbing temples, and blood that refuses to be washed away, because it's no longer on your hands, it's imprinted in your mind. The inglorious end. The thing no one ever informs you when you become an executioner is this: you don't retire. There's no farewell banquet, no pension. No gilded axe mounted on a commemorative plaque. One day, you simply begin to tremble, or miss your mark, or perhaps murmur too loudly in your sleep, and the town starts to whisper, not with sympathy, but with growing concern. Not for you, but for efficiency. Because to them, you are not a human being, you are a mechanism, a moving component within the machinery of justice. As long as the blade remains sharp and the swing remains steady, they nod from a distance and pretend you don't exist. But the moment you falter, the instant your hands tremble on the block or you spend a second too long with the rope, the machine falters, and everyone takes notice. Suddenly, you become a problem, a liability. Not because your soul is unraveling, but because you are disrupting the spectacle. The crowd did not gather to witness guilt, they came to witness competence. So, the town initiates its quiet transition. Perhaps a younger man, your apprentice, your son, your distant cousin, begins to handle lesser tasks, a flogging here, a branding there, then a hanging. No one explicitly tells you that you've been superseded. You simply receive fewer summons. The flow of coins diminishes. The stares transform from fear to a faint pity, the most perilous kind of pity. For it signifies that they have ceased to need you. And when you are finally forgotten, it is not an oversight, it is by design. You recede into your humble cottage beyond the walls. Your tools slowly corroding beside you. Your hands, once powerful and precise, now tremble when you lift a spoon. Your knees ache from a lifetime of kneeling at the chopping block. And no one comes to visit. Your name devolves into an uncomfortable footnote in the village's collective memory. Remember old, what's his name? The one with the axe? Oh, yes. Didn't he go mad? And when you eventually succumb to death, likely alone, the church remains undecided whether to inter you within the consecrated grounds or simply leave you beneath a tree somewhere. Because in the final analysis, you were never truly a part of the town. You were a service, and services, once worn out, are quietly discarded. The perversion of justice. Initially, the grim purpose of your role made sense. The condemned were thieves, murderers, heretics. You were the arm of the law, the cutting edge of justice. You did not question. You executed efficiently. Publicly, without hesitation. But as the years relentlessly trudged on, and the chopping block grew slick with monotonous repetition, a subtle unease began to stir beneath the surface of your certainty. It began modestly, a man sentenced for pilfering a loaf of bread. He had 5 children. No defense, only desperate hunger. Then, a woman accused of witchcraft because she murmured prayers in the wrong dialect. You witnessed the stark terror in her eyes, the absolute bewilderment as the noose tightened around her neck. And then there were the nobles, the ones who commanded deaths not due to culpability, but for political expediency, territorial disputes, raw envy, or the sheer necessity of making someone vanish. You began to comprehend that you were not merely interring criminals, you were burying secrets. The executioner's block transformed into a filter, sifting out the inconvenient, the impoverished, the powerless. And you were the final stamp, the one who rendered it irreversible. You yearned to believe in the sanctity of law, in structure, in unambiguous right and wrong. But the voices that once so confidently declared guilt now rang hollow. You had heard the crowd cheer as a man screamed. You had witnessed magistrates exchange furtive glances like merchants haggling over a soul. And you were perpetually instructed, it is not your prerogative to judge. You merely carry out the sentence. But what transpires when the sentence itself is erroneous? There is no avenue to question, no confessional booth, no public forum. You sit alone at night, sharpening your blade, pondering how many lives were extinguished because someone needed a message sent. And you are powerless to speak. Not merely because it is perilous, but because who would even listen? You are the executioner. No one credits the man who wears the hood. You are not afforded opinions, you are given orders. So, you enter justice, one stroke at a time. Not because you desire to, but because you are compelled to. Because in this world, truth is a luxury. And you are merely the broom that sweeps it beneath the scaffold. And the most agonizing realization of all, you are beginning to suspect that you were never justice's sword, merely its gravedigger. The legacy of silence. You dedicated your life to service. Not to glory, not to riches, not even to justice, simply to duty, the grim, blood-soaked kind no one ever discusses at feasts. And when your end finally arrives, it is not dramatic. There are no poetic final words. No family gathered at your bedside. Just a persistent cough that refuses to dissipate. A slow, quiet fading in a straw-filled bed that still faintly smells of iron and damp rope. One last breath, and that is all. No bells toll. No priest rushes to your side. No one sheds a tear. Your body is discovered by a local boy, or perhaps not found at all until the stench becomes intolerable. The town clerk records your passing in a single sentence scrawled on the reverse of a tax ledger: executioner, deceased, replacement pending. There is no funeral procession. No carved headstone, perhaps a simple wooden marker if someone remembers, but it will not endure the winter. You are not interred in the churchyard, of course. You are laid to rest in the earth outside the gates, the very gates you were never permitted to pass through in life. Executioners, after all, were unclean, tainted, useful, and ultimately disposable. You were the one who buried hundreds. Yet, no one truly buries you. The town moves on swiftly. There is always another blade, another son. Another unfortunate soul who inherits the job like a curse woven into tradition. In the years to come, people might speak of you in fragments: the one who beheaded that baron. Remember the man who drank alone and never looked anyone in the eye? Or worse, what was his name again? Your legacy is not comprised of stories, or children, or peace. It is silence. It is absence. It is the space you occupied that no one wishes to discuss. And perhaps that is fitting. You spent your life ensuring the guilty were forgotten. You simply never realized you would be forgotten alongside them. So, in the end, your death mirrors your life, necessary, but never mourned. Because in medieval society, you were never destined to be remembered. You were meant to be endured. And now, finally, you are not. The illusory comfort of riches. It was impossible to spend your wealth like an average citizen. You'd step into a tavern, your coin pouch jangling, and an abrupt hush would fall over the room. The barkeep would pour your ale, then meticulously wipe down the counter. As if your mere presence left a permanent stain. You'd tip him generously, even doubling the usual amount, yet he'd steadfastly avoid your gaze. If you sought to purchase a new tunic, the tailor would present the finished garment with tongs. The coins you handed him were genuine, but in his estimation, they were tainted. Blood money, he might mutter under his breath. As though the silver itself might physically harm him. And heaven forbid you attempted an act of charity. On one occasion, you tried to make a donation to the church. They accepted the offering. Then promptly used the funds to pay someone else to meticulously clean the holy relics, just as a precaution. Indeed, you could accumulate considerable riches. You might even manage to construct a modest dwelling adorned with actual furniture, a rare luxury for someone of your social standing. But the bitter irony was profound: the more you earned, the more profoundly isolated you became. You were wealthy, undoubtedly, but your wealth was akin to that of a dragon hoarding its gold in a secluded cave, alone and universally feared. People mistakenly assumed that your substantial earnings somehow compensated for the social stigma, that a heavy purse could magically balance a heavy conscience. Yet, gold does not silence the persistent echo of nightmares. It cannot scrub the indelible marks of blood from your memory, nor can it restore your lost humanity. It simply lies there, cold, gleaming, utterly useless for the things that truly matter. In the Middle Ages, you didn't purchase peace with money, you bought silence. You bought space. You purchased the dubious privilege of drinking in solitude at a forgotten corner table without being ordered to leave. And deep within, you recognized the undeniable truth. Every coin you possessed was acquired with someone else's dying breath. That was the grim currency of your existence, and no amount of it, however vast, could ever procure forgiveness. The paradox of public persona. In a community of perhaps only a few hundred inhabitants, everyone knew precisely who you were. They were intimately familiar with your name, your dwelling, the distinctive sound of your footsteps, your profession, and most importantly, your shadow. They would whisper it, "That's him." They would murmur as you passed, "Executioner." They would instinctively pull their children closer, as if you might, by mere proximity, accidentally decapitate someone mid-stride. And yet, despite this pervasive recognition, no one genuinely knew you. You might have a favorite melody, a cherished childhood remembrance, or a surprisingly adept skill at wood carving, but none of that held any weight. Your entire identity was ruthlessly confined to a single, stark role, the blade. People did not perceive you, they perceived what you did. You were a living, breathing job description. Even when you were off duty, simply walking to purchase onions, people would deliberately cross the street as if you carried a virulent contagion. No one inquired about your well-being. No one asked if the demands of your grim work weighed heavily on your spirit, because they had already concluded that you were utterly devoid of human feeling. To them, you were not a man grappling with doubts or regrets, you were an axe with legs. It was a peculiar duality. You were known by everyone, yet fully comprehended by no one. You were an ever-present figure in every courtroom decree, every hushed bedtime story, every moral lesson whispered to misbehaving children. But you were never truly invited into the very society you served. When you entered the tavern, conversations would cease. When you departed, they would immediately resume. You would hear laughter, but never shared with you, always after you had gone. There was no, "How was your day?" No, "Are you coping all right?" No, "Do you ever wish things were different?" If you spoke too much, you were considered disturbing. If you remained silent, you were deemed cold. If you dared to smile, that was the most egregious transgression, it was unsettling. The man who wields the sword should never, under any circumstances, smile. And so, with the passage of time, you embraced the role. You became the figure they already believed you to be, grim, taciturn, and seemingly carved from unyielding stone. You learned to stand motionless, to nod subtly, to recede into the background. Because while every inhabitant of the town knew your name, not a single one of them knew you. You were a myth given flesh, a necessary phantom, familiar in function, utterly alien in every other aspect. The haunting aftermath. After a protracted day of dismemberment, with blood-stained boots and the unsettling burden of public trauma, you finally returned to your secluded cottage beyond the town's defensive walls, surrounded by an oppressive silence and a subtle metallic scent. You shed your cloak, carefully set down your axe, and sat on the edge of your straw-filled mattress, striving to reclaim some semblance of humanity. But the nightmares were already lying in wait. You would lie down and close your eyes. And there they would be, the faces. Not heroic, not villainous, just people. Some screamed, some wept, some mumbled fervent prayers with trembling lips. Some gazed directly into your eyes, as if to convey, "You know this is wrong." And the most profoundly disturbing of all, the ones who uttered no sound, the composed ones, the resigned ones. Those who embraced their grim fate more swiftly than you ever could. You would relive every swing. You would feel the sickening crunch of every bone. You would hear the gasps of the crowd, their revulsion, their morbid fascination. You would visualize the bodies plummeting in excruciating slow motion, like tragic marionettes whose strings had been severed. There was no reprieve, not in slumber, not in silence, not in the numbing embrace of drink. Believe me, you had desperately sought it. You began to recoil instinctively at mundane sounds. The sharp clatter of firewood, the ominous snap of rope, the familiar creak of wooden stairs. All were constant reminders, persistent echoes of your grim work. And you could never expunge the memories of the executions you mishandled, the blade that hesitated, the cut that veered off course, the agonizing moan of someone who was meant to die more swiftly. You carried that burden. No one offered solace or sought your well-being. There was no medieval counselor for post-traumatic decapitation disorder. You did not compose letters detailing your anguish. You did not weep openly. You simply stared into the flickering fire, praying that your soul wouldn't completely lose its sensitivity before your hands did. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you would pose the unsettling questions to yourself: what if they were innocent? What if justice was fundamentally flawed? What if I was fundamentally flawed? But you already understood that the answer was irrelevant, for the sentence had been passed. The crowd had gathered, the axe had fallen, and the nightmares remained. You were trained to kill, not to grieve. But your subconscious mind apparently never received that crucial directive. So you would awaken with clenched fists, throbbing temples, and blood that refused to be washed away. Because it was no longer on your hands, it was imprinted in your mind. The untimely fade. The unspoken truth about becoming an executioner is this: you don't retire. There's no grand farewell feast. No pension plan, no ceremonial golden axe mounted on a commemorative plaque. One day, you simply begin to tremble uncontrollably, or miss your target. Or perhaps utter incoherent cries too loudly in your sleep, and the town starts to whisper, not with empathy, but with a growing concern. Not for your well-being, but for efficiency. Because to them, you are not a human being, you are a mechanism, a crucial, moving component within the intricate machinery of justice. As long as the blade remains razor-sharp and your swing remains unwavering, they will nod from a safe distance and pretend you don't exist. But the very moment you falter, the instant your hands tremble at the block or you take a second too long with the rope, the machine clogs, and everyone takes immediate notice. Suddenly, you become a problem, a distinct liability. Not because your soul is unraveling, but because you are disrupting the public spectacle. The crowd did not assemble to witness guilt, they came to witness competence. So, the town initiates its subtle transition. Perhaps a younger man, your apprentice, your son, a distant cousin, begins to handle lesser tasks, a public flogging here, a branding there, then a hanging. No one explicitly informs you that you've been supplanted. You simply start receiving fewer summons. The flow of coins dwindles. The stares transform from fear to a faint, dangerous kind of pity. Because it signifies that they have ceased to have a need for you. And when you are finally forgotten, it is not an oversight, it is by deliberate design. You recede into your humble cottage outside the walls, your tools slowly corroding beside you. Your hands, once powerful and precise, now tremble when you attempt to lift a spoon. Your knees ache from a lifetime of kneeling at the chopping block, and no one comes to visit. Your name becomes an uncomfortable footnote in the village's collective memory. Remember old. What's his name? The one with the axe? Oh, yes. Didn't he go mad? And when you eventually succumb to death, likely in solitude, the church remains undecided whether to inter you within the consecrated grounds or simply leave you beneath a tree somewhere. Because in the final analysis, you were never truly a part of the town. You were a service, and services, once rendered obsolete, are quietly discarded. The erosion of conviction. At the outset, the grim nature of your occupation seemed entirely logical. The condemned were thieves, murderers, heretics. You were the instrument of the law, the cutting edge of justice. You did not question. You performed your duties efficiently, publicly, without hesitation. But as the years relentlessly dragged on, and the chopping block grew slick with monotonous repetition, a subtle unease began to stir beneath the surface of your resolute certainty. It started incrementally, a man sentenced for the theft of a mere loaf of bread. He had 5 children. No defense. Only desperate hunger. Then, a woman accused of witchcraft because she uttered prayers in an unfamiliar tongue. You witnessed the stark terror in her eyes. The absolute bewilderment as the noose slipped over her neck. And then there were the nobles, the ones who commanded executions not due to genuine culpability, but for political maneuvering. Territorial disputes, raw jealousy, or the sheer expediency of making someone disappear. You began to grasp that you were not merely interring criminals, you were burying secrets. The executioner's block transformed into a ruthless filter, one that relentlessly sifted out the inconvenient, the impoverished, the powerless. And you were the final, indelible stamp. The one who rendered it irreversible. You desperately wanted to believe in the inviolability of law, in rigid structures, in unambiguous right and wrong. But the voices that once so confidently declared guilt now echoed hollowly. You had heard the crowd cheer as a man shrieked in agony. You had witnessed magistrates exchange furtive glances like merchants haggling over a soul. And you were perpetually instructed, it is not your place to judge. You only carry out the sentence. But what happens when the sentence is fundamentally flawed? There is no arena to pose such questions, no confessional booth, no public forum. You sit alone at night, meticulously sharpening your blade, pondering how many lives were extinguished because someone needed a message sent. And you are powerless to speak out. Not merely because it is dangerous, but because who would even listen? You are the executioner. No one credits the man who wears the hood. You are not afforded opinions, you are given orders. So, you bury justice one stroke at a time. Not because you desire to, but because you are compelled to. Because in this brutal world, truth is a luxury. And you are merely the broom that sweeps it beneath the scaffold. And the most agonizing realization of all, you are beginning to suspect that you were never justice's sword, you were merely its gravedigger. The California Gold Rush. A glimmer of fortune. Your life was dedicated to service. Not to glory, not to personal enrichment, not even to the abstract concept of justice, simply to duty, the grim, blood-soaked kind no one dared to speak of at celebratory feasts. And when your end finally arrived, it was far from dramatic. There were no poetic final utterances. No family members gathered at your bedside. Just a persistent cough that refused to abate. A slow, quiet fading in a straw-filled bed that still faintly smelled of iron and damp rope. One final, weary breath, and that was all. No bells tolled. No priest rushed to your side. No one shed a tear. Your body might be discovered by a local boy. Or perhaps not found at all until the stench became an undeniable problem. The town clerk would mark your passing in a single, terse sentence scribbled on the reverse of a tax ledger, executioner. Deceased, replacement pending. There was no funeral procession, no carved headstone, perhaps a simple wooden marker if someone remembered, but it would not survive the winter. You were not interred in the churchyard, of course. You were laid to rest in the earth outside the gates, the very gates you were never permitted to traverse in life. Executioners, after all, were deemed unclean, tainted, useful, and ultimately disposable. You were the one who had buried hundreds. And yet, no one truly buried you. The town moved on with remarkable swiftness. There was always another blade, another son, another unfortunate soul who inherited the job like a curse wrapped in the guise of tradition. In the ensuing years, people might speak of you in fragmented recollections, the one who beheaded that baron. Remember the man who drank alone and never met anyone's gaze? Or worse, what was his name again? Your legacy is not comprised of compelling stories, or cherished offspring, or peaceful repose. It is silence. It is absence. It is the void you filled that no one wishes to acknowledge. And perhaps that is fitting. You spent your life ensuring the guilty were forgotten. You simply never realized you would be forgotten alongside them. So, in the end, your death mirrored your life. Necessary, but never mourned. Because in medieval society, you were never truly meant to be remembered. You were meant to be endured. And now, finally, you are no longer. The spark of gold. It all began with the unassuming flow of water through a humble ditch. On January 24, 1848, a man named James W. Marshall, while engaged in work on the American River near Coloma, California, looked down and caught sight of something peculiar glinting in the sunlight. At first, he found it difficult to believe. It was just a minuscule, yellowish flake. It could have been mere fool's gold. But no, it passed the scratch test. It was authentic gold. Actual, verifiable gold. He swiftly ran to inform his employer, John Sutter, who was, to put it mildly, less than ecstatic. Sutter wasn't fixated on immediate riches. His mind was preoccupied with land. He was meticulously constructing an agricultural empire, and he understood all too well the profound implications of a gold discovery: unfettered chaos, stampedes of unfamiliar individuals. The assertion of squatter claims, and the abrupt end of his carefully conceived dreams. So, the two men made a desperate attempt to keep the find a secret. Spoiler alert, they failed spectacularly. Within a matter of weeks, the rumors propagated like an unstoppable wildfire, quite literally spreading faster than the established mail system. Locals began to materialize with their pans and pickaxes. People abandoned their jobs mid-shift. Sailors deserted their vessels in San Francisco and vanished into the surrounding hills. Newspapers didn't even bother with the formality of fact-checking. Gold found in California was printed as if it were gospel truth. And then, utter pandemonium erupted. That summer, President James K. Polk officially confirmed the discovery in a pivotal address to Congress. That was the decisive moment. The genie had been irrevocably released from its bottle. By 1849, an astonishing number of people, exceeding 90,000 individuals, affectionately dubbed 49ers, were pouring into California by land, by sea, and by every conceivable, arduous route imaginable. What began as one man's momentary squint into a ditch rapidly escalated into the largest mass migration in U.S. history. But here's the poignant truth: Marshall never became wealthy. Neither did Sutter. The original discoverers ultimately ended up impoverished, embittered, and marginalized as the very gold fever they had unleashed consumed everything in its path. So, envision it. A single, accidental shimmer in a muddy excavation led to a global stampede, fundamentally reshaped the map, vigorously fueled American expansion, and propelled California from a sleepy frontier into full statehood in a mere 2 years. And the profound irony was that the men who first unearthed the gold barely managed to secure a single nugget for themselves. Now that we've set the historical stage, let's delve more deeply into the sheer madness, the monumental migration, and the enduring myths that transformed California into the fabled land of golden dreams and shattered promises. The Great Trek West. Imagine yourself as a farmer in Ohio or a shopkeeper in Boston in the year 1849. You catch the faint whispers, you see the electrifying headlines: gold, mountains of it, simply waiting to be claimed in California. You sell your land, tenderly bid farewell to your family, and literally begin walking across an entire continent. That's precisely what thousands did. And just like that, the era of the 49ers had commenced. They arrived in relentless waves from every state in the Union and from lands far more distant. Latin Americans, Australians, Europeans, and even a substantial contingent of Chinese miners braved the perilous Trans-Pacific crossing. Some journeyed in covered wagons, enduring the ravages of cholera, starvation, and every conceivable meteorological hell the American West could inflict upon them. Others boarded dilapidated ships, took an arduous detour through the Isthmus of Panama, and desperately hoped they wouldn't succumb to yellow fever before boarding another vessel heading north to San Francisco. And oh, San Francisco, a once tranquil port town with perhaps only 1,000 residents prior to the sudden onslaught. By the close of 1849, more than 25,000 people had deluged the area. It was a truly surreal metamorphosis. Canvas tents sprang up with greater rapidity than permanent structures. Entire ships were abandoned in the harbor and repurposed into makeshift warehouses, prisons, and even hotels. You could navigate through the harbor without ever touching water, simply stepping from one deserted ship deck to another. It was anything but glamorous. Picture vast expanses of mud. Hastily constructed saloons, exorbitantly priced pickaxes, and a real estate market that made Manhattan seem like a bargain bin. A single egg might set you back $3. A decent pair of boots? Good luck, they might cost you a staggering $100. Inflation ran rampant, and elaborate scams were more prevalent than actual gold nuggets. But none of that truly mattered. The intoxicating dream was sufficient. Gold fever held an unyielding grip. Some individuals struck it rich in a single afternoon. Others toiled for years and died penniless. The rivers of the Sierra Nevada became choked with aspiring miners, each vigorously swirling a pan, praying that their next scoop would irrevocably alter their destiny. This monumental migration profoundly changed more than just California, it reshaped the entire American psyche. Suddenly, arduous labor wasn't merely honorable. It held the tantalizing promise of immense wealth. The concept of manifest destiny received a potent shot of adrenaline. California, barely a discernible dot on the map a year prior, was now the veritable promised land. Of course, when thousands of desperate men converged into the same few valleys, armed with shovels, tensions inevitably escalated. The harsh reality of the digs. So, you had made it. You had traversed vast deserts, survived bouts of dysentery, and perhaps even eluded a few opportunistic bandits. You had finally reached the legendary gold country. Congratulations. Now, the true misery was about to commence. Mining was not a glamorous treasure hunt, it was backbreaking, soul-crushing labor. Forget visions of chests overflowing with gold coins. This entailed hours spent submerged knee-deep in frigid rivers, swirling pans filled with gravel, desperately praying for a glimmer of fortune. Most found nothing. For every fortunate strike, there were 1,000 empty pans and tens of thousands of aching backs. In the nascent days, the primary method was placer mining. Scooping gravel from riverbeds and allowing water to separate the gold. But as the easily accessible gold vanished, the methods intensified. Miners progressed to using rockers, then sluices. And eventually, hydraulic mining, a violent process that involved blasting entire hillsides apart with powerful water cannons. This method ravaged the land and poisoned rivers. But it delivered results. The mining camps themselves were epitomes of chaos. Imagine a rowdy collection of canvas tents, rudimentary cabins, and saloons. All haphazardly stitched together by desperation and ubiquitous mud. Bathing was an infrequent luxury. Food was scarce. Whiskey, however, was plentiful. Violence simmered just beneath the surface. Disputes over claims could turn lethal with terrifying speed, especially in an environment where no one trusted the rudimentary legal system, and everyone carried a shovel. And then there was the omnipresent threat of disease. With thousands crammed into unsanitary camps, cholera and dysentery were simply part of daily life. If you managed to avoid dying from contaminated water, you might succumb to a poorly cooked squirrel or a festering infection from a minor cut. There were no legitimate doctors. Only a handful of self-proclaimed medicine men whose knowledge of moonshine far surpassed their medical expertise. To compound the misery, prices were exorbitant. A shovel that cost $2 in New York could command $30 in the mines. Eggs were considered luxury items. Laundry was an almost impossible luxury, you simply had to embrace wearing dirt. And if you did strike it rich, good luck keeping your newfound wealth. Theft was rampant. One moment you might possess a pouch of gold dust, and the next morning it would be gone. Along with your bunkmate. Yet, somehow, the potent myth endured. People continued to flock to California. The tantalizing hope, the irresistible gamble. The raw possibility of it all, it was enough to sustain them. Where gold emerged, people followed. And where people converged, chaos was never far behind. Boomtowns and vigilante justice. The gold rush didn't merely create temporary mining camps, it birthed entire towns overnight. Places like Placerville, Marysville, and Deadwood, yes. That Deadwood, experienced population explosions faster than anyone could control. These settlements were aptly termed boomtowns, and the name fit perfectly. They materialized into existence with explosive speed and often collapsed just as rapidly. These were places largely devoid of established laws, without effective governance, and frequently lacking a moral compass. Judges were scarce. Sheriffs were even rarer. And the gold itself, it drove men to desperate measures. If you failed to stake a good claim, someone might steal it. If you did stake a good claim, someone might still attempt to steal it, or simply shoot you and seize it. This volatile environment ushered in the era of the vigilantes. In towns where formal law enforcement had not yet arrived, or had been corrupted by bribes, citizens frequently took justice into their own hands. Vigilante groups formed. Sometimes with genuinely noble intentions, other times driven purely by greed. Trials could be shockingly swift, and sentences even swifter. If someone was apprehended stealing gold or cheating at cards, they might be hanged from the nearest tree without so much as a proper hearing. This wasn't justice in its purest form. It was expediency. The saloons served as the bustling nerve centers of these towns. Gambling, excessive drinking, brawling, and the occasional accidental gunshot were all part of the pervasive soundtrack. And if you were seeking companionship, the soiled doves, women who had followed the rush westward, operated the bordellos, charging exorbitant premiums for their company and navigating a world heavily weighted against them. Still, not everyone succumbed to lawlessness. Many individuals strove to construct genuine communities. Churches sprang up, schools were established, and newspapers began circulating, attempting to bring order to the chaos. San Francisco even formed a powerful committee of vigilance to root out corruption, eventually becoming more influential than the actual nascent government. One curious detail: gold wasn't always used as direct currency for purchasing goods, it was too easily shaved off. Instead, people traded in gold dust, literally measured by tiny brass scales placed on the bar counter. A mere pinch might procure you a meal, a full pouch, a night you might not remember. But boomtowns were not built to last. Once the gold veins depleted, so did the population. Many of these towns were abandoned, transforming into ghost towns almost overnight. A shifting nation. While prospectors avidly chased dreams of wealth, others paid a price far greater than gold. The California gold rush was not solely a narrative of fortune. It was also one of displacement, violence, and profound racial injustice. And the first to suffer grievously were the Native American tribes. California's indigenous peoples had inhabited the region for millennia. But once the rush commenced, they were brutally driven from their ancestral lands with terrifying speed. Forests were indiscriminately felled, rivers poisoned by mercury and sediment, and ancient hunting grounds overrun by a deluge of miners and hastily erected boomtowns. Some tribes were forcibly conscripted into servitude under the euphemistic guise of apprenticeships. Others were outright massacred. State-sanctioned militia campaigns were even funded with the explicit aim of eliminating native populations. It was nothing short of an unmitigated disaster. In just 2 decades, California's native population plummeted by nearly 90%. Then came the waves of immigrants, particularly the Chinese. By the early 1850s, tens of thousands of Chinese laborers had disembarked in California. Most intended to work diligently, earn money, and remit it home to their families. But what they encountered instead was pervasive suspicion, rampant racism, and oppressive taxes. In 1850, California enacted a foreign miners' tax explicitly targeting the Chinese. They were legally barred from owning land, from testifying against white men in court, and from mining without paying extortionate fees. Yet, despite these formidable barriers, many Chinese miners persevered. They formed tightly knit communities, meticulously reworked abandoned claims, and even laid the foundational groundwork for future infrastructure, notably constructing key sections of the Transcontinental Railroad. Just a few years later, Mexican and Latin American miners were also systematically pushed out, often through violent means. Despite possessing legitimate claims and invaluable gold mining expertise, they were forcibly expelled from towns, pejoratively labeled greasers, and summarily stripped of their rights. And African Americans, both free individuals and those enslaved, journeyed westward in pursuit of opportunity. Some indeed found it, establishing businesses, farms, and even their own newspapers. However, the racial lines were always shifting, and the promise of freedom came with no guarantees. Slavery was not legally sanctioned in California. But loopholes were ruthlessly exploited by Southern slaveholders who brought enslaved people with them under different designations. The gold rush fundamentally transformed America. But it also starkly revealed its deepest contradictions. It was a land of boundless opportunity, yes, but only for a select few. Gold didn't just glitter. It efficiently greased the gears of a rapidly transforming nation. The California gold rush injected a seismic jolt into the U.S. economy. By 1852, gold exports from California totaled over $80 million, an amount equivalent to billions in contemporary currency. That kind of financial influx doesn't merely fill individual pockets. It fortifies banks, underpins national currencies, and powerfully fuels burgeoning industries. Suddenly, California was no longer a quiescent western frontier. It was the indisputable epicenter of national attention, burgeoning wealth, and ambitious aspirations. California's accelerated statehood. But there was one significant problem. California was not yet a state. It wasn't even an organized territory in the traditional sense. It had been acquired in 1848 after the Mexican-American War, but its governance was in utter disarray. The sudden, overwhelming deluge of settlers made it abundantly clear that something had to be done, and quickly. So, in 1850, a mere 2 years after the first glimmer of gold was discovered, California was admitted as the 31st state of the Union. That was an astonishingly rapid pace for U.S. expansion. And unlike many other Western territories, it bypassed the awkward, formative adolescent years as a territory, proceeding directly to full statehood with no waiting in line. However, there was a critical caveat. California was admitted as a free state, explicitly prohibiting slavery. This decision sent the already precarious balance between free and slave states into a dangerous tailspin. The southern states were enraged. The northern states were invigorated. And the escalating political tension propelled the nation one step closer to civil war. Meanwhile, back in California, the wealth continued to flow. And not exclusively from gold. Astute entrepreneurs quickly realized that the miners themselves were the true gold mine. A German immigrant named Levi Strauss began selling remarkably tough canvas pants that miners simply couldn't tear through, inadvertently inventing what would become iconic blue jeans. Economic giants emerge. Leland Stanford, a shrewd entrepreneur, sold essential supplies to miners before embarking on ventures that would see him co-found the Central Pacific Railroad, a pivotal component of the Transcontinental Railroad, and establish Stanford University. That railroad, incidentally, became the vital artery connecting California's abundant gold to the bustling markets of the eastern United States. Before the advent of railways, reaching California by land or sea was a journey spanning months. With trains, it became a matter of mere days. The gold rush didn't just ignite immediate economic growth. It also spurred the development of crucial infrastructure, fostered robust commerce, and fueled a dramatic surge in Western migration. And as California grew wealthier and more interconnected, The United States recognized a profound truth: whoever controlled the West might very well dictate the nation's future. Environmental devastation and budding conservation. If the gold rush transformed ambitious men into legends, it also irrevocably turned natural landscapes into battlegrounds. The initial mining endeavors were relatively low impact, relying on simple pans, shovels, and perhaps a small rocker box along a riverbank. However, as the easily accessible surface gold dwindled, miners resorted to increasingly aggressive and destructive methods. That's when the true environmental devastation began to unfold. By the mid-1850s, hydraulic mining emerged. Imagine this. Colossal nozzles, known as monitors, discharged water with sufficient pressure to blast entire hillsides apart. Whole mountains were reduced to murky mud slurry in the relentless pursuit of minuscule gold flakes. It was undeniably fast and efficient, but it was also utterly devastating. Forests were leveled. Hills vanished. Rivers ran brown for miles. Sediment from hydraulic mining clogged riverbeds and inundated fertile farmlands. The once thriving Central Valley began to drown under millions of tons of mining debris. The Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers overflowed their banks, not merely from rainfall, but from the unnatural accumulation of displaced earth. Crops perished. Towns were submerged. Fish populations collapsed. This was not merely mining, it was slow-motion environmental warfare. Miners also extensively utilized mercury to help separate gold from sediment. While effective, the mercury did not simply disappear. It seeped into the soil, flowed downstream, and poisoned entire ecosystems. To this day, mercury from the gold rush era can still be detected in California's waterways, nearly 2 centuries later. Eventually, the scale of the destruction became impossible to ignore. In the 1880s, a determined group of Central Valley farmers initiated legal action against a hydraulic mining company in a case that evolved into a national landmark, Woodruff v. North Bloomfield Gravel Mining Company. The farmers prevailed, and in 1884, hydraulic mining was effectively prohibited, marking the first major environmental ruling in U.S. history. However, the damage was already done. The California landscape had been drastically reshaped, in some areas beyond recognition. Forests were transformed into barren mud flats. Hills were hollowed out and never recovered. Rivers were rerouted. Ecosystems were upended. And yet, paradoxically, the gold rush also planted the earliest seeds of America's environmental conscience. As people witnessed the ecological toll, voices began to rise, advocating for balance, for responsibility, and for the protection of the land. These were the nascent ideas that, decades later, would blossom into national parks and robust conservation movements. The gold rush forged dreams, undoubtedly, but it also left profound, enduring scars. From boom to myth. By the late 1850s, the most abundant gold veins had been largely exhausted. Boomtowns began to empty, and the pickaxes were exchanged for plows, pens, and printing presses. But the gold rush wasn't merely fading. It was transforming. What had begun as a chaotic scramble for riches evolved into a powerful cultural myth. The California gold rush indelibly etched itself into the American imagination as a compelling narrative of adventure, unparalleled freedom, and radical reinvention. Newspapers eagerly spun sensational tales of lucky strikes and overnight millionaires, while dime novels romanticized gritty prospectors into rugged heroes of the untamed West. Of course, the reality was considerably messier, but myths rarely require strict adherence to facts. The prospector became an enduring American icon, weathered hat, a long, grizzled beard, and a gold pan in hand. Never mind that most actual miners were broken, destitute, or interred in shallow, forgotten graves. The powerful image persisted. California became unequivocally synonymous with opportunity. The elusive American dream suddenly acquired a tangible location. Even common phrases we still employ today originated in this gold-soaked era: striking it rich, panning for gold, and yes, even the mother lode, all echo the specialized terminology of 1850s mining camps. And let's not forget the iconic Levi's jeans. Born from the demanding needs of hardy miners and eventually embraced by the entire world. Cities like San Francisco deliberately embraced the legend. What had once been a lawless, mud-soaked port meticulously rebranded itself as a gleaming gateway to success. Tourism pamphlets extolled the virtues of gold country, and old mining towns began staging elaborate festivals, historical reenactments, and parades, proudly celebrating a time that had nearly destroyed them. The gold rush also profoundly influenced American cinema. Westerns romanticized the solitary miner with a heart of gold, heroically fending off claim jumpers and charming saloon girls. It wasn't historically accurate, but it sold tickets and helped to firmly embed the frontier myth within popular culture. However, beneath the glamorized legends lay harsher truths of widespread environmental damage, systemic racial exclusion, and countless lives lost in the desperate pursuit of fleeting glitter. Still, the powerful dream endured, and perhaps that was the ultimate point. Because the gold rush wasn't solely about material wealth, it was profoundly about hope. The profound belief that if you were sufficiently brave, or incredibly lucky, or simply stubborn enough, you could fundamentally transform your life with nothing more than a shovel and sheer determination. The California Gold Rush officially concluded in 1855. But its far-reaching impact never truly ceased. California, once a remote Mexican frontier, had become an economic and cultural powerhouse. Within just a few years, it had achieved statehood, reshaped America's burgeoning economy, and attracted people from every continent. But more significantly, it had become a potent symbol, a symbol of reinvention, of audacious ambition, and of the tantalizing possibility that something greater might still lie buried just beneath the surface. A lingering legacy. The unprecedented population surge didn't solely bring gold hunters. It attracted a diverse array of builders, educators, merchants, and dreamers. Former miners transitioned into farmers, established businesses, and founded newspapers. The very infrastructure originally constructed for gold extraction was intelligently repurposed for broader growth. Rough roads evolved into vital trade routes. Temporary camps transformed into burgeoning cities, and crude shacks became permanent homes. San Francisco, in particular, metamorphosed from a muddy outpost into a thriving metropolis almost overnight. And the gold rush didn't merely leave physical scars, it left an indelible emotional blueprint. That same gamble it all attitude would later fuel the meteoric rise of Hollywood, the innovation hub of Silicon Valley, and even the counterculture movements of later decades. Whether it involved celluloid, silicon chips, or psychedelics, the underlying idea remained consistent: come west, attempt something audacious, and perhaps, just perhaps, you'll strike gold. Even the tech boom of the late 20th and early 21st centuries unmistakably echoes the intrepid spirit of the 49ers. Young entrepreneurs, fueled by unwavering belief and copious amounts of caffeine, rush into California with little more than a laptop and an ambitious dream. It's not so different from those dusty miners clutching pickaxes and harboring immense hopes. However, the gold rush also serves as a stark reminder of the profound cost of unchecked ambition. Native communities were decimated, delicate ecosystems were disrupted, and systemic inequality was baked into the very fabric of the economy from its inception. For every fortunate strike, hundreds were left behind, utterly forgotten in the historical footnotes. Today, remnants of that tumultuous era still dot the landscape: ghost towns, rusted mining equipment, and winding trails snaking through the majestic Sierra Nevada mountains. Museums meticulously preserve the artifacts, schools impart the captivating legends, and tourism boards diligently sell the romanticized fantasy. But the deeper legacy resides within the collective psyche. The gold rush instilled in America a permanent sense of urgency, the compelling notion that something bigger, better, richer is perpetually out there, just waiting to be discovered. All you need to do is chase it relentlessly. So, when you encounter the phrase, California Dream, remember that it originated with a tiny shimmer in the dirt and countless brave men willing to risk absolutely everything for a chance at something more. The genesis of ancient commerce. Long before anyone meticulously carved laws into stone tablets or painstakingly inked treaties onto papyrus, trade was already profoundly shaping the ancient world. It commenced not with elaborate maps or sophisticated merchants, but with footsteps, worn tracks etched across hills and valleys, trodden by prehistoric peoples in their fundamental quest for what they lacked. Long before the celebrated Silk Road, the enigmatic Amber Road, or the aromatic Spice Route, there existed indispensable trails of salt, stone, and pure survival. Imagine a time predating the invention of writing, before the rise of sprawling cities, when human beings lived in scattered tribal groups, engaging in essential barter out of sheer necessity. One village might possess an abundance of flint, another might have access to valuable shells, and a third might control sources of salt, a precious preservative in a world utterly devoid of refrigeration. Somehow, these vital commodities traversed distances, traded hand to hand, tribe to tribe, across vast and formidable terrain. And the compelling evidence is unequivocal. Obsidian from the Anatolian region appears in Neolithic excavation sites hundreds of miles distant. Baltic amber materializes in graves as far south as Mycenaean Greece. Someone, long before the establishment of formal borders and intricate bureaucracy, was facilitating the movement of these crucial goods. These very first trade routes were not meticulously carved or ingeniously engineered, they were organic, inherently dictated by the contours of nature. Rivers naturally became liquid highways. Mountain passes transformed into essential corridors. Forest trails evolved into vital lifelines. And with each succeeding generation, these pathways became progressively more defined. Hunters gradually evolved into traders, and traders, in turn, became vital messengers, conveying not only material goods but also crucial gossip, captivating stories, and even nascent religious concepts. Trade was not solely about the exchange of tangible objects. It was fundamentally about the dissemination of knowledge. It was the primary mechanism through which farming techniques, metallurgical skills, and even early artistic styles spread between disparate cultures. A tribe that acquired the ability to smelt copper from another might experience a complete transformation of its way of life. A decorative motif shared through traded pottery might inspire an entirely new artistic tradition. These exchanges were inherently slow, often spanning multiple generations. But their impact was utterly revolutionary. And remarkably, all of this occurred before the very existence of written language. The enduring legacy of these nascent routes lies in their remarkable persistence. Many later, more renowned trade roads, such as portions of the Silk Road or the Arabian incense trails, followed the same general paths first forged by prehistoric traders. These invisible highways formed the veritable nervous system of early human connection. An intricate web of trails that stitched the world together long before anyone ever conceived of drawing a map. Mesopotamia, the cradle of commerce. By 3000 BCE, the scattered, informal barter trails of prehistory had evolved into something considerably more sophisticated, structured commerce conducted between nascent cities, burgeoning kingdoms, and eventually, sprawling empires. Nowhere was this profound transformation more dramatic than in Mesopotamia, the fertile land situated between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Frequently hailed as the cradle of civilization, it was also undeniably the cradle of ancient commerce. The Sumerians, and later the Akkadians and Babylonians, were not merely skilled farmers and formidable builders, they were also astute traders, and they keenly understood the immense value of keeping meticulous records. Around this period, they developed cuneiform, one of the earliest known writing systems. Initially, its primary function was to track the movement of goods, how much grain had been traded, how many goats had been exchanged, what precise quantity of beer had been delivered to the temple storehouse. In essence, writing itself was born out of the compelling necessity to manage trade. These Mesopotamian city-states were not self-sufficient, they lacked many essential resources. Thus, trade became absolutely indispensable. They imported valuable timber from the Levant, copper from Oman, tin from Iran, and precious stones like lapis lazuli from what is now Afghanistan. In return, they exported abundant textiles, grain, oil, and intricately crafted goods. The merchants who facilitated this extensive trade were not simply adventurers, they were seasoned professionals, frequently backed by powerful temples or royal houses. Operating with formal contracts, detailed ledgers, and intricate risk-sharing agreements. Mesopotamia's trade routes extended both overland and along vital waterways. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers served as the primary arteries, with barges ferrying goods between prominent cities like Uruk, and Babylon. Overland. Caravans of donkeys transported goods north to Anatolia or east towards Elam. Trade was not merely an economic activity, it held significant political weight. Alliances were forged through the exchange of goods. Kings dispatched lavish gifts to secure peace, and merchants acted as informal diplomats, carrying messages between distant lands. The very concept of a distinct merchant class began to emerge. These were not nobles, priests, or warriors, they were specialists in negotiation, risk assessment, and complex logistics. And they wielded considerable influence. In due course, their presence became absolutely essential to the stability and prosperity of these early urban economies. Mesopotamia demonstrated unequivocally that trade possessed the power to bind cities together, generate substantial wealth, and drive remarkable innovation. It transformed mere exchange from a simple necessity into a sophisticated system, evolving from informal handshakes to binding contracts. The Phoenician maritime masters. While Mesopotamian merchants held sway over the rivers and overland routes of the Near East, another civilization ascended to dominate the seas, the Phoenicians. By 1200 BCE, these master mariners from the Levantine coast, modern-day Lebanon, along with parts of Syria and Israel, had transformed the Mediterranean into one of history's most dynamic and active maritime trade networks. The Phoenicians did not construct their influence through military conquest, they built it through commerce. Their city-states, notably Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, were geographically small but fiercely independent, and they shared a common, profound gift, the sea. With narrow strips of arable land and limited agricultural resources, these cities instinctively turned to the waves for their very survival. And they did more than merely survive, they thrived. Phoenician ships were renowned for their speed, durability, and advanced design, far ahead of their contemporaries. They pioneered the innovative use of biremes, ships featuring 2 rows of oars, making long-distance sea travel significantly more efficient and reliable. These remarkable vessels crisscrossed the entirety of the Mediterranean, trading a vast array of goods, from valuable timber and fine glass to the universally coveted Tyrian purple dye, meticulously extracted from sea snails and literally worth its weight in gold. The Phoenician alphabet and cultural diffusion. Yet, perhaps the Phoenicians' most enduring contribution wasn't merely in the goods they transported, but in the writing system that accompanied their cargo, the alphabet. Their innovative system, comprising 22 consonantal letters, would profoundly influence the development of Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew scripts, forming the very foundation of modern written communication. They meticulously established trading outposts stretching from the island of Cyprus to the powerful city of Carthage, and from Sicily to the southern reaches of Spain. Carthage itself, which would later emerge as Rome's most formidable adversary, originated as a humble Phoenician trading post. These strategically placed coastal colonies collectively forged a vast commercial network that rivaled the influence of any terrestrial empire. And Phoenician trade wasn't solely about the movement of physical goods, it was a powerful engine of cultural diffusion. Through their extensive interactions, they facilitated the widespread dissemination of technologies, religious practices, and distinctive art styles across 3 continents. Egyptian scarabs have been unearthed in Iberian graves, and Babylonian cylinder seals discovered on Greek islands, evidencing a complex web of connection woven not by kinship or conquest, but by commerce. Yet, despite their immense influence, the Phoenicians left behind remarkably few monumental ruins. Their legacy is quieter, discernible in ancient shipwrecks, scattered fragments of pottery, and most significantly, in the alphabets we continue to utilize today. Desert highways, the camel caravans. As intrepid seafarers like the Phoenicians transformed the Mediterranean into a bustling commercial superhighway, another equally vital network flourished far from the coast, traversing the immense deserts of North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. These were the enduring trade routes of camel caravans. Ancient highways etched into the shifting sands, where survival was a hard-won prize for every mile covered. The desert might appear to be an insurmountable barrier, but for ancient traders, it functioned as an essential corridor. Long before the advent of paved roads, camel caravans meticulously connected sub-Saharan Africa with North Africa, the Levant, and the Arabian Peninsula. These crucial routes facilitated the movement of precious gold, vital salt, aromatic frankincense, fragrant myrrh, coveted ivory, enslaved people, and countless stories. The camel, aptly dubbed the ship of the desert, made all of this possible. Domesticated around 1000 BCE, the resilient dromedary camel could withstand scorching heat, journey for days without needing water, and transport heavy loads weighing up to 600 pounds. In North Africa, the trans-Saharan trade routes thrived, linking powerful kingdoms like Ghana, Mali, and later Songhai. These were not desolate, barren wastes, rather, they were intricate networks of vital oases, bustling market towns, and fortified caravanserai where weary traders could rest, water their camels, and exchange goods beneath starry skies. Gold from the Niger River basin traveled north, often traded pound for pound with salt, a critically vital resource in the tropics. Salt, meticulously cut into massive blocks from the Sahara, was transported south, forming the very backbone of emerging empires. Meanwhile, in Arabia, the incense trade experienced a profound boom. Frankincense and myrrh, meticulously harvested in southern Arabia, modern-day Yemen and Oman, were highly prized in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome for their indispensable use in temples, medicine, and elaborate burials. Caravans traversed the vast Arabian desert along established routes like the Incense Road, making essential stops at cities such as Petra and Mecca long before the rise of Islam. These were not swift journeys, some caravans undertook treks lasting months, even years. Traders faced formidable challenges including blinding sandstorms, opportunistic bandits, and extreme dehydration. However, the potential rewards were enormous. Cities like Timbuktu, Gao, and Yuba grew immensely wealthy and influential, serving as vibrant hubs of commerce, culture, and intellectual pursuit. What the desert trade lacked in monumental architectural ruins, it more than compensated for in its remarkable resilience. These arduous routes connected continents, unified disparate empires, and fostered interactions between diverse faiths. They meticulously stitched together Africa, Arabia, and beyond, one hoof print at a time. The Silk Road, a tapestry of exchange. No ancient trade network quite captured the imagination or reshaped the world with such profound impact as the Silk Road. Spanning over 4,000 miles from China to the Mediterranean, it was not a singular thoroughfare but rather a tangled web of caravan trails, challenging mountain passes, and vital river crossings that intricately wove together the destinies of entire civilizations. Its earnest beginning dates back to the Han Dynasty, around the 2nd century BCE. When the Chinese Emperor Wu Di dispatched his envoy Zhang Qian westward in search of potential allies. What he unexpectedly discovered instead was an immense opportunity. The realization that distant peoples were eagerly desirous of China's most luxurious export, silk. Lightweight, remarkably durable, and possessing an almost ethereal glow. Silk quickly became a sensation across Central Asia, Persia, and eventually reached Rome, where senators expended fortunes to wear it, only to nervously declare it decadent and morally dangerous. But silk was merely the genesis. East truly met West through a dynamic exchange of goods, groundbreaking ideas, and even devastating diseases. From China flowed porcelain, tea, and paper. From India came exotic spices, shimmering gemstones, and the profound philosophy of Buddhism. Persia offered exquisite carpets, delicate glassware, and magnificent horses. Rome, and later Byzantium, exported fine wines, rich olive oil, and expertly crafted metalwork. Each successive link in this vast chain contributed something novel and received something unexpected in return. The journey itself along the Silk Road was brutal. Traders navigated scorching deserts like the Taklamakan and ascended icy peaks in the Pamirs. Bandits lurked at every treacherous pass. And merchants rarely completed the entire epic journey. Instead, goods changed hands dozens of times, passed along like hushed whispers through bustling markets and essential caravanserai. Cultural exchange flourished alongside commerce. Monks, missionaries, and musicians traversed these paths, disseminating philosophies, ancient fables, and new musical forms. The Silk Road didn't merely transport merchandise, it conveyed groundbreaking mathematics, advanced astronomy, medical knowledge, and diverse artistic expressions. The widespread propagation of Buddhism from India into China and beyond stands as one of the Silk Road's most profound and enduring legacies. Cities like Samarkand, Kashgar, and Dunhuang evolved into cosmopolitan centers where multiple languages mingled freely and temples of various faiths stood harmoniously side by side. Entire empires rose and fell based on their ability to control key segments of the route, from the Parthians to the Sogdians to the mighty Mongols. And then came the Black Death. Likely carried along these very same routes in the 14th century, grimly reminding the world that trade also facilitates the movement of unseen dangers. The Indian Ocean. A maritime superhighway. While the Silk Road carried caravans across formidable mountains and arid deserts, the Indian Ocean offered a vast liquid superhighway, one that was notably faster, often cheaper, and in many respects even more influential. By 10,000 BCE, the Indian Ocean trade network was already a vibrant nexus of activity, connecting East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, Southeast Asia, and eventually China in an expansive web of commerce and intricate cultural exchange. Unlike the often chaotic and unpredictable nature of land routes, the Indian Ocean possessed a predictable rhythm, the monsoons. These seasonal winds were remarkably consistent, blowing in one direction during the summer and precisely the opposite during the winter. Highly skilled sailors learned to expertly harness these wind cycles, enabling meticulously planned round trips across immense distances. Thanks to this reliable monsoon system, a merchant ship could set sail from East Africa to India, load up with valuable goods, and reliably return months later with time to spare. What rich variety of goods did these ships carry? From India came prized black pepper, exquisite cotton textiles, intricately carved ivory, and later, valuable sugar and indigo dyes. From Arabia flowed aromatic frankincense, fragrant myrrh, swift horses, and sweet dates. East Africa offered gleaming gold, enslaved people, and exotic animal products. Southeast Asia traded in highly coveted spices, nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon, which were so incredibly valuable that they could fetch a price higher than gold per ounce. This extensive trade wasn't just about the exchange of raw materials. It was profoundly about the exchange of ideas. Islam, for example, spread rapidly along these maritime routes, not through military conquest, but organically through the power of commerce. Muslim merchants established thriving communities in Indian ports, along the Swahili coast, and as far east as Indonesia. Local rulers often converted to Islam for economic advantage, seamlessly embedding religion into the very fabric of trade. Ports like Calicut, Zanzibar, and Malacca evolved into vibrant, multi-ethnic melting pots. You could hear Arabic, Tamil, Swahili, and Chinese spoken simultaneously in a single bustling market. These were not isolated backwaters, they were truly global hubs centuries before globalization became a common term. Ship technology also advanced with remarkable speed. The dhow, with its distinctive triangular sail, became the vessel of choice, celebrated for its agility and speed. Later, massive Chinese junks, featuring multiple decks and innovative watertight compartments, joined the mix, particularly during the epic voyages of Admiral Zheng He in the 15th century. What distinguished the Indian Ocean trade wasn't just its immense scale, but its underlying spirit of collaboration. Unlike the territorial empires on land, maritime trade relied more on mutual benefit than on brute force, at least until later European intervention. Imperial roads, control and connection. As established trade routes matured, powerful empires began to grasp a crucial realization: controlling the road meant controlling the wealth. From the vast Persian royal road to Rome's enduring stone highways, and even to the challenging mountainous trails of the Inca Empire, these overland routes transformed into indispensable tools not merely for commerce, but for asserting dominance, conducting diplomacy, and executing statecraft. Let's begin with the Achaemenid Persians. By the 5th century BCE, their remarkable royal road extended over 1,600 miles from Susa to Sardis. It served as the logistical backbone of their expansive empire, enabling messengers, soldiers, and merchants to move rapidly across 3 continents. Strategically placed stations, equipped with fresh horses and guards, were located every few miles. A royal courier could traverse the entire road in just over a week, an unheard-of feat for that era. And alongside vital messages, a steady stream of merchants flowed, paying tolls that significantly enriched the imperial coffers. Next came Rome, whose profound obsession with roads was legendary. The saying, "all roads lead to Rome," was not merely a proverb, it was a fundamental policy. Roman roads were astonishing feats of engineering, meticulously laid with stone, expertly cambered for drainage, and clearly marked by milestones. The Via Appia, commenced in 312 BCE, connected Rome to southern Italy and became the prototype for an extensive network that eventually spanned over 250,000 miles. These robust roads facilitated rapid troop deployment, efficient tax collection, and, critically, robust trade. Goods from the distant provinces flowed into the very heart of the empire: Egyptian grain, Spanish silver, Syrian glass, and African ivory. Far across the ocean, another impressive road empire flourished: the Incas. Without the advantage of wheels or horses, they constructed one of the most astonishing road systems in the world. The Capac Nan, or Inca Road, stretched over 24,000 miles through the rugged Andes Mountains. It seamlessly linked the empire's mountainous spine from present-day Colombia to Chile. Highly trained runners, known as chasquis, relayed messages and small goods across dizzying suspension bridges and along steep cliffs. The Incas utilized llamas for transport and imposed stringent control over who could use the road, thereby ensuring absolute state dominance over trade. In all these empires, roads were not merely about facilitating movement, they were fundamentally about control. They enabled rulers to project their power, enforce taxation, and meticulously regulate commerce. Traders certainly utilized them, but always at the discretion of the state. Medieval revival and new connections. By the tumultuous fall of Rome and the subsequent rise of various medieval kingdoms, Many ancient trade routes had fallen into disrepair or been entirely abandoned. Yet, the innate human desire for connection and the pervasive drive for profit never truly vanished. In fact, the medieval period witnessed a remarkable revival of old routes and the forging of entirely new ones, driven by a surprising array of individuals and groups: religious pilgrims, crusaders, influential merchant guilds, and ambitious city-states. Religion proved to be a powerful catalyst for movement. Pilgrimage routes across Europe, such as the famous Camino de Santiago, evolved into vital arteries of movement. Pilgrims were not merely carrying their faith, they also carried money, essential supplies, captivating stories, and even nascent new ideas. Inns, markets, and burgeoning towns sprang up along these sacred paths, and local economies experienced a significant boom. Spiritual devotion kept people moving, and commerce naturally followed. Meanwhile, prosperous Islamic empires to the east were thriving. The Abbasid Caliphate transformed cities like Baghdad and Damascus into glittering centers of trade. Muslim merchants vigorously expanded trade into sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia, and even as far as China, effectively linking the Islamic world to a revitalized Silk Road. Arabic rapidly became the lingua franca of trade across 3 continents. In Northern Europe, the formidable Hanseatic League emerged, a powerful alliance of influential merchant cities like Lübeck, Hamburg, and Bruges. They effectively controlled the flow of goods across the Baltic and North Seas, trading essential commodities such as salt, furs, grain, and timber. With their own formidable navy and established legal systems, they were not simply traders, they were an economic superpower. Italian city-states, most notably Venice and Genoa, elevated trade to an unprecedented level. Strategically positioned between East and West, they became indispensable middlemen for luxury goods arriving from Asia via the Eastern Mediterranean. Spices, silks, and precious stones flowed through their bustling ports, enriching powerful merchant families like the Medici. Then came the Crusades. While they ultimately failed to reclaim the Holy Land, they undeniably succeeded in reopening and significantly expanding East-West connections. European crusaders returned not merely with battle scars but with exotic silks, aromatic spices, and newly acquired appetites for Eastern goods. The result was a surging demand for these Eastern commodities and a renewed interest in the overland and maritime trade routes that could reliably deliver them. Guilds emerged to protect local economies and standardize trade practices. Modest markets grew into vibrant fairs. Fairs evolved into thriving towns. And towns matured into bustling cities. Trade wasn't merely reviving, it was becoming deeply institutionalized. By the late 15th century, the world stood on the precipice of a dramatic transformation. The age of ancient trade routes was gradually giving way to a new era, one driven by powerful sailing ships, formidable cannons, and audacious global ambition. But the fundamental groundwork for this seismic shift had been meticulously laid over millennia, on the backs of camels, in the creaking of ox carts, and upon the decks of merchant ships guided by the timeless stars. The dawn of global commerce. The dramatic surge in maritime exploration, spearheaded by Portugal and Spain, did not initiate global trade, but rather provided its unprecedented acceleration. Vasco da Gama's pioneering sea route to India in 1498 completely bypassed the traditional land-based Silk Road, effectively undercutting the long-established Middle Eastern middlemen and profoundly redrawing the entire economic map of the world. Suddenly, coveted spices, luxurious silks, and delicate porcelain flowed directly from Asia to Europe, reaching consumers faster, more affordably, and on a scale that had never been witnessed before. Colonial empires swiftly emerged in its wake. The Portuguese meticulously established a network of trading posts stretching from Mozambique to Malacca. The Spanish ventured westward, stumbling upon the Americas, where vast quantities of gold and silver were ruthlessly extracted and subsequently shipped across oceans. The Dutch and English were not far behind, founding powerful East India companies that operated with the authority of sovereign governments, possessing their own armies, navies, and ironclad monopolies over entire trade networks. Ancient overland routes like the Silk Road consequently diminished in economic importance, yet their profound legacy endured in the foundational infrastructure, the spread of languages, the intermingling of cultures, and the established patterns of commerce. Traditional trade hubs like Samarkand and Constantinople, though reduced in their former glory, retained poignant echoes of their past prominence. New, vibrant cities arose from this transformed legacy: Amsterdam, London, and New York. All constructed upon the very same foundational principles of connectivity and robust commerce. Modern trade routes, be they intricate railroad networks, expansive highway systems, bustling air corridors, or sophisticated undersea cables, still largely trace the patterns initially established by ancient traders. While globalization today is powered by complex algorithms and colossal cargo ships, its fundamental DNA originates from Phoenician sea lanes, Roman stone roads, and the predictable rhythms of the Indian Ocean monsoons. And this influence extends far beyond mere economics. Ideas, religious doctrines, technological innovations, and even virulent diseases all followed the well-worn paths of traders. The compass, the printing press, the principles of algebra, the invigorating beverage of coffee, the profound philosophy of Buddhism, none of these would have spread across continents without the engine of commerce. Trade didn't just move goods, it propelled history itself. So, the next time you observe a massive container ship gliding across the vast ocean or hear the rhythmic clatter of a freight train passing by, remember that it's not merely steel and cargo. It's the resounding echo of a Silk Road caravan, the ethereal shadow of a Phoenician galley, and the ceaseless pulse of humanity, forever in motion, pursuing not only profit but also the fundamental drive for connection. Tulum, a coastal enigma. Tulum is far from your typical ancient Maya city. While most Maya centers are found deep within the dense jungle, enveloped by thick forest and housing hidden temples, Tulum presents a starkly different scene. It rises dramatically above the cerulean Caribbean Sea, perched majestically on a limestone cliff overlooking shimmering turquoise waves. It's a postcard-perfect vista imbued with a rich and powerful history, a sacred coastal outpost that vigilantly watched over both the terrestrial realm and the vast expanse of the sea. Situated on the easternmost edge of the Yucatan Peninsula, in what is now Quintana Roo, Mexico, Tulum was one of the last major cities to be constructed and continuously inhabited by the Maya. Its zenith of influence came relatively late, between the 13th and 15th century CE, during the post-classic period, just prior to the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. Yet, despite its late bloom, Tulum left an indelible mark on Maya history. Its name, Tulum, means wall in Yucatec Maya, a direct reference to the formidable limestone barrier that encloses the city on three sides. The fourth side, of course, is the boundless Caribbean Sea, stretching infinitely eastward. This unique geographical combination rendered Tulum exceptionally defensible and profoundly symbolically significant. According to some historical accounts, the city may have originally been named Zama, meaning City of the Dawn, likely due to its flawless alignment with the rising sun. From its commanding cliffs, Maya lookouts could easily spot merchant canoes gracefully gliding in from distant Cuba, Belize, and even Honduras. Tulum served as a crucial node in a complex maritime trade network, actively dealing in valuable obsidian, precious jade, essential salt, golden honey, intricate textiles, and dried fish. It seamlessly connected vital inland cities like Koba and Chichen Itza to the sea, and its wealth flowed through both swift canoes and laborious overland caravans. However, Tulum was more than just a thriving trade hub, it was a powerful spiritual stronghold. Every structure, every raised platform, and every sacred shrine was meticulously positioned, many precisely aligned with celestial bodies or significant dates within the intricate Maya calendar. It was a city that observed the heavens as closely as it observed the ocean's surface. And even after the Spanish arrived and the city was eventually abandoned, Tulum was never truly forgotten. Its haunting ruins remained conspicuously visible from the sea, serving as a silent, powerful reminder to passing sailors of a sophisticated civilization that expertly charted the stars long before European ships ever graced these waters. Tulum's cosmic architecture. Tulum might appear modest in size when compared to colossal Maya metropolises like Chichen Itza or Tikal, but its compactness is profoundly deceptive. Every single structure within its formidable stone walls was placed with deliberate purpose, guided by a complex interplay of astronomy, deep spiritual belief, and astute strategic design. This was not merely a city, it was a cosmic map meticulously carved into stone. At its very core, Tulum's layout reflects a harmonious balance between the earthly and the celestial realms. The city is fortified on three sides by incredibly thick defensive walls, each measuring up to 5 meters in thickness and 3 meters in height, a clear declaration that Tulum was as profoundly concerned with physical protection as it was with spiritual devotion. Yet, nestled within those formidable walls lies a meticulously arranged collection of temples, altars, and platforms, all precisely aligned with the heavens. The undeniable centerpiece of the city is El Castillo, not a castle in the European sense, but a majestic temple pyramid that dominates the entire skyline. Perched dramatically on the cliff edge, it served as both a revered religious shrine and, notably, a practical lighthouse for Maya sailors. When the sun rises directly behind it during specific, astronomically significant times of the year, it bathes the facade in perfect, symmetrical light. Many scholars believe it was systematically used to track the solstices and equinoxes, enabling the Maya to perfectly synchronize their intricate rituals with the predictable rhythms of the cosmos. Adjacent to El Castillo stands the Temple of the Descending God, so named for the distinctive carved figure adorning its doorway, a winged figure depicted in an inverted posture, believed to represent a celestial or fertility deity. This particular temple faces west, expertly capturing the setting sun, perhaps symbolizing the profound transition from day to night, or from life to death, which were key themes in Maya spirituality. Numerous other buildings are constructed on elevated platforms and are oriented along precise axes, often aligned northeast-southwest or east-west. These were not arbitrary choices. They meticulously echo the Mayas' profound obsession with tracking the movements of Venus, the Sun, and the lunar cycle. Even seemingly innocuous doorways and windows appear to have been strategically designed to frame specific celestial events during certain times of the year. Tulum's brilliant planners didn't just design a defensible city, they designed a spiritual calendar rendered in stone. It was a place where architecture, astronomy, and profound mythology seamlessly merged into the fabric of daily life. El Castillo, beacon of sky and sea. Rising majestically above the shimmering turquoise sea like a silent, ancient sentinel, El Castillo stands as Tulum's most iconic and recognizable structure. Strategically positioned at the very edge of a towering limestone cliff, it commands not only the expansive coastline but also the celestial sphere, representing a remarkable fusion of sophisticated engineering, advanced astronomy, and profound sacred symbolism. While not as massive in scale as the colossal pyramids found in inland Maya cities, El Castillo was never intended to compete in sheer size. Its fundamental purpose was to signal. Constructed in multiple distinct stages, El Castillo likely fulfilled a variety of crucial roles: a revered temple, a sacred shrine, an elevated watchtower, and potentially even a lighthouse. During daylight hours, its elevated position and stark stone facade made it conspicuously visible from far out at sea. For Maya sailors meticulously navigating the Caribbean in their large dugout canoes, El Castillo served as both a tangible physical harbor and a profound spiritual beacon, a guiding light of protection under the vigilant gaze of the gods. But its utility extended beyond daytime guidance. At night, it is highly probable that fires were ignited within the temple sanctuary atop the structure, paired with small strategically placed windows and aligned with narrow, sea-facing gaps in the treacherous coral reef. The emanating glow could have been ingeniously used to help mariners safely approach Tulum's shore through the perilous, narrow breaks in the coral. This would make El Castillo one of the earliest known examples of a lighthouse-like structure in the Americas. From a religious perspective, El Castillo was most likely consecrated to the diving god or the descending god, a celestial figure intimately connected to Venus, the planet that held a central and revered role in Maya cosmology. The Maya deeply believed that Venus exerted influence over warfare, agriculture, and the precise timing of their calendar. Structures like El Castillo were therefore employed to meticulously track its appearances and disappearances in the night sky. During specific, predetermined dates within the solar and Venusian calendars, the sun would rise or set directly in line with the temple, bathing it in radiant light, a moment of profound cosmic synchronization. The temple itself is modest in its interior size but elevated to ensure maximum visibility. Its carefully constructed stairways and niches strongly suggest that elaborate rituals were performed at its summit, with priests conducting ceremonies that were visible from the sprawling plaza and the distant coastline below. Unlike the massive, sprawling ceremonial complexes found inland, El Castillo was not about overt grandeur, it was fundamentally about function, guiding ships, channeling potent solar energy, and symbolically connecting the vast expanse of the sea with the infinite sky. The Temple of the Frescoes. Art and observation. Tucked discreetly near the very heart of Tulum's ceremonial core stands one of its most captivating and spiritually charged edifices, the Temple of the Frescoes. Unlike the imposing verticality of El Castillo, this particular structure commands attention not through sheer scale, but through its intricate detail. It is a multi-level temple complex brimming with profound symbolism, rich iconography, and housing some of the finest surviving Maya murals along the Yucatan coast. The temple served a dual essential purpose, as a revered shrine and as a sophisticated observatory. The upper level most likely functioned as a ritual space reserved for priests, while the lower chamber contained beautifully painted murals and intricately carved stone reliefs that vividly brought the complex Maya cosmos to life. Although the relentless forces of weather and time have regrettably eroded many of the original pigments, enough detail remains to offer a breathtaking glimpse into the depths of Maya spiritual thought. Inside, the vibrant frescoes depict an entire pantheon of gods, diverse deities, and enigmatic supernatural creatures. Most prominent among them is the ubiquitous descending god, frequently portrayed upside down, a rare and fascinating figure within Maya art. This particular deity, associated with Venus, fertility, and possibly even bees, revered for their crucial role in pollination and honey production, both vital to Maya agriculture and ritual, appears in multiple locations throughout Tulum, strongly reinforcing his paramount importance to the city's unique identity. The murals also visually narrate scenes of creation, arduous journeys through the underworld, and epic cosmic battles. Sky bands, monstrous earth creatures, and a myriad of celestial symbols swirl together in a painted narrative that perfectly mirrored the Maya worldview of a multi-layered universe. For the Maya, the world was conceptually divided into three fundamental parts: the heavens above, the earthly realm inhabited by humans, and the watery underworld below, all of which appear in these remarkable frescoes in striking visual form. On the exterior, the temple is richly adorned with intricate stucco masks and recessed niches, some of these likely once held offerings or small idols. Robust columns support the portico, imbuing the structure with an almost unique Greco-Maya aesthetic, a rare architectural feature for this specific region. Astronomically, the Temple of the Frescoes is widely believed to have been precisely aligned with key solar events. Its strategically placed windows and sight lines may have marked the solstices or equinoxes, aiding priests in the meticulous maintenance of the sacred calendar. It was simultaneously a revered house of worship and a precise timekeeping device. As functionally critical as it was visually beautiful, The enigmatic descending god. Among Tulum's sacred structures, none is more enigmatic or visually distinctive than the Temple of the Descending God. Modest in its physical scale but profoundly rich in symbolism. This temple is singularly dedicated to one of the most mysterious deities in the Maya pantheon, a figure consistently depicted upside down, with wings or a flared headdress, seemingly descending from the heavens. His distinctive image recurs throughout Tulum, strongly suggesting a pervasive guardian presence, a celestial overseer watching over the city uniquely perched between the vast sea and the boundless sky. Located just to the west of the majestic El Castillo, the temple rests atop a small, unassuming platform. It features a single-room sanctuary accessed by a narrow stairway, and a prominent niche positioned directly above the doorway. And there, within that niche, is the defining element, the stucco relief of the descending god. He is depicted head first, knees bent, arms outstretched, as though captured mid-flight or mid-fall. His true name remains unknown to modern scholars, but researchers have linked him to Kinichahau, the sun god, or potentially to a bee deity, highly revered for its crucial role in pollination and honey production, both indispensable elements in Maya agriculture and ritual. The peculiar descending posture is exceptionally rare in Maya art and architecture. Typically, deities are shown upright, majestically enthroned, or dynamically engaged in combat. But here, the inverted figure powerfully suggests a spiritual inversion, a divine messenger traversing worlds, bringing celestial influence down into the human realm. Some interpretations strongly connect him to Venus, the morning star, a profoundly powerful celestial body in Maya astronomy, intimately associated with cycles of war, rebirth, and profound sacrifice. The temple itself is precisely aligned to capture the dramatic light of the setting sun, creating a breathtaking visual spectacle during specific times of the year. This precise alignment may have served to signal crucial ritual dates or significant seasonal transitions. For Tulum's priests, such moments were not merely beautiful. They were divinely appointed occasions. Inside, the temple would have meticulously housed offerings, incense burners, and possibly the ashes or bones of elite individuals. Though physically small, it was undeniably a site of intense spiritual significance, a sacred space to commune with the sky, interpret cosmic omens, and perform intricate rites under the ever-watchful gaze of the descending god. This singular figure, with wings gracefully spread and body inverted, ultimately became a powerful symbol of Tulum itself, a city that stood metaphorically on the very edge of the land, between the vast sky and the endless sea. Precisely at the turning point of the calendar and the cosmos. Tulum's formidable defenses. While Tulum is deservedly celebrated for its elegant temples and meticulous astronomical alignments, its physical defenses narrate a distinct tale, one of robust protection, shrewd strategy, and astute geopolitical awareness. Unlike the majority of ancient Maya cities, which typically sprawled openly across the natural landscape, Tulum was deliberately constructed as a formidable fortress. 3 colossal stone walls encircle the inland sides of the city, while the fourth edge terminates abruptly in a sheer cliff face overlooking the vast, unpredictable Caribbean Sea. It wasn't merely a sacred precinct, it was unequivocally secure. The walls remain remarkably impressive even today, reaching up to 5 meters in thickness and, in some sections, soaring as high as 5 meters. They feature narrow, easily defensible passageways. These were not merely symbolic boundaries, they were practical military installations, specifically engineered to repel potential raiders, opportunistic pirates, or aggressive rival city-states. The entrances were deliberately kept small and few, compelling any intruder to enter in single file, thus rendering them vulnerable and exposed. Strategically positioned along the perimeter were numerous watchtowers, sturdy, rounded structures equipped with small windows or slits that afforded clear lines of sight over both the land and the sea. From these vantage points, vigilant guards could spot approaching canoes long before they reached the shore. These towers may have also served a dual purpose as communication hubs, utilizing smoke or fire signals to alert the city's elite of any impending threat or significant arrival. However, these defenses also possessed a profound spiritual dimension. To the Maya, walls were not merely barriers against enemies, they fundamentally separated the sacred from the profane. Within the protective confines of the walls lay holy space, where temples were precisely aligned with the cosmos, rituals echoed the celestial movements of the stars, and every step was believed to be observed by the gods. Outside lay the untamed wilderness, the unknown, and the inherently unstable world of shifting politics and intermittent warfare. Tulum's strategic positioning also afforded it extraordinary control over both vital land and sea trade routes. It lay directly along the significant Maya coastal trade network, which served as a major artery for goods moving up and down the Yucatan Peninsula. Essential commodities such as salt, honey, jade, obsidian, and cacao flowed through its gates. Any merchant vessel sailing the coast would undoubtedly behold Tulum's distinctive cliffside silhouette long before reaching it, a powerful visual reminder of its pervasive power and impenetrable protection. In Tulum, strength and sanctity were perpetually intertwined. Tulum, a bustling maritime crossroads. Long before the emergence of colonial ports and sprawling international harbors, Tulum flourished as a vibrant maritime trading post, a crucial coastal checkpoint that seamlessly linked inland Maya cities with the broader Caribbean world. Its strategic location was not chosen solely for its breathtaking beauty. Perched advantageously above the sea with convenient access to sheltered landing beaches, Tulum was intrinsically built to connect. The Maya were exceptionally skilled seafarers. They meticulously carved massive dugout canoes from robust ceiba trees. Some of these vessels large enough to transport 20 to 30 people along with hundreds of pounds of cargo. These impressive canoes plied the waters up and down the Yucatan coastline, journeying as far south as modern-day Honduras and as far north as the Gulf Coast. Aided by prevailing currents and consistent trade winds, Maya merchants followed well-established maritime routes that solidified Tulum's status as a pivotal stop. Goods flowed in from every conceivable direction. From the inland highlands came valuable obsidian, prized jade, and essential cacao, all highly esteemed items used in ritual practices and elite exchange. From coastal regions, merchants brought in vital salt, dried fish, intricate cotton textiles, honey, vibrant feathers, and ornamental shells. Tulum itself did not produce all of these commodities. Instead, it served as a critical distribution point where goods could be efficiently stored, taxed, and then redirected along the expansive trade network. What made Tulum truly unique was its unparalleled combination of direct sea access and its formidable defensive structure. Unlike open coastal towns, Tulum was fortified by imposing walls. This provided not only protection from potential raiders but also afforded strict control over who entered and exited the city. Goods were carefully monitored. The ruling elites collected tribute, and priests likely provided blessings for the transactions, thereby reinforcing the profound idea that trade and ritual were intimately intertwined in Maya society. Foreign merchants may have also passed through its gates. Certain ceramic styles and imported artifacts suggest ongoing contact with other Mesoamerican peoples, including those from central Mexico and the Gulf Coast. Tulum was by no means isolated, it was deeply integrated into a dynamic regional system that pulsed with economic, cultural, and spiritual energy. Canoes likely docked at small landing beaches situated just below the towering cliffs, where goods were offloaded and then transported up into the city. From there, they could be exchanged, stored, or carried further inland by human porters to major urban centers like Coba. Tulum was a crossroads not merely of geography, but of diverse identities. The sunset of a sacred city. For centuries, Tulum prospered as a sacred stronghold and a bustling trade port. However, like all great ancient cities, its era of dominance eventually receded. By the time the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century, Tulum was still standing, its walls largely intact, its temples still visible from the sea, but it was already in a noticeable decline. Its golden age had clearly passed. So, what factors contributed to this change? Tulum's decline was likely a gradual process, not a sudden catastrophe. There is no archaeological evidence suggesting widespread warfare or violent destruction, no signs of mass fires or an invading force. Instead, it appears the city slowly but steadily lost its strategic importance. As major trade networks shifted and larger inland centers like Chichen Itza and Mayapan rose and fell, Tulum's influence began to wane. The vital economic arteries that once flowed through its gates may have simply rerouted elsewhere. There's also the broader context of Maya civilization itself. By the late post-classic period, many Maya cities were already experiencing political fragmentation, shifting alliances, and dwindling populations. Environmental stresses, including prolonged droughts and extensive soil exhaustion, likely contributed to widespread instability across the Yucatan Peninsula. These factors would have undoubtedly impacted Tulum, even if its coastal location made it less dependent on agriculture. Then came the Spanish. In 1518, Spanish explorer Juan de Grijalva sailed past Tulum. His crew meticulously noted the city's tall stone buildings and imposing walls, struck by its sheer scale and sophisticated structure. A few years later, during Hernán Cortés's expedition to Honduras, the Spanish again passed by Tulum, remarking on its beauty and the towering temple that stood like a sentinel over the sea. However, they did not stop to conquer it immediately. By the end of the 16th century, however, Tulum was definitively abandoned. Whether through the devastating impact of introduced diseases, the profound disruption of established trade routes, or the sweeping cultural upheaval brought by colonization and the imposition of Christianity, its inhabitants gradually departed. What remained were empty temples, wind-worn walls, and the haunting echo of rituals once performed beneath the stars. Yet, Tulum never completely disappeared. Unlike many jungle-enshrouded Maya ruins, it remained exposed, visibly from the water. A spectral city on the cliff. Sailors passed it for centuries, its distinct silhouette serving as a silent marker of a vibrant world that had slowly slipped into memory. Long after its last incense burned and its final traders departed, Tulum stood in silent majesty above the sea, not truly lost, but patiently waiting. Rediscovery and enduring legacy. Unlike jungle-engulfed cities such as Palenque or Calakmul, Tulum was never completely buried beneath the earth. Its dramatic cliffside perch ensured its visibility to both passing sailors and local inhabitants alike. However, it wasn't until the 19th century that it truly re-entered the world's historical imagination. In 1842, two intrepid explorers, John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood, arrived in Tulum during their now famous expedition through the Maya world. Stevens, an American diplomat, and Catherwood, a talented British artist, were among the very first Europeans to document these ruins in meticulous detail. Catherwood's stunning illustrations of El Castillo and the Temple of the Descending God captivated European readers. And Tulum quickly garnered fame as one of the most photogenic and accessible Maya sites. Archaeological work intensified significantly in the 20th century. The Mexican government initiated preservation efforts, stabilizing structures and diligently clearing encroaching vegetation. Unlike deeper jungle ruins, Tulum was relatively easy to access. And it swiftly became a highly sought-after destination, not just for historians and archaeologists, but also for tourists, photographers, and spiritual seekers. Today, Tulum stands as one of the most visited archaeological sites in Mexico. Thousands of people walk through its ancient stone gates each day, passing temples that once precisely aligned with the stars and walls that once staunchly defended sacred ground. Visitors now stand where Maya priests once meticulously charted Venus in the sky and where ancient sailors once saw the city emerge like a profound vision from the turquoise waves. Yet, the true magic of Tulum lies in what it continues to reveal. New studies are utilizing advanced LiDAR scanning and sophisticated satellite mapping technologies to uncover even more about the site's original layout and its intricate connections to inland cities like Koba. Scholars are still actively debating the true identity of the descending god, the precise functional aspects of El Castillo, and the exact reasons for the city's ultimate decline. But beyond these lingering questions, Tulum remains a powerful symbol of Maya resilience, architectural genius, and profound cosmic curiosity. It serves as a potent reminder that ancient peoples were not isolated in their past. They expertly navigated vast oceans, meticulously tracked celestial bodies, constructed intricate observatories, and meticulously structured their cities around cycles far larger than themselves. Tulum is not merely a collection of ruins on a cliff, it is a vibrant, living testament to a civilization that viewed the universe as something to align with, rather than to conquer. And that profound vision continues to echo every single time the rising sun spills its golden light across the ancient stones.